The young man thoughtfully thought about what would happen if he disappeared and ended up in another world. He thought about how he would start living. He was surrounded by a sad working atmosphere. He works from morning till night and feels his body and heart hurt more and more. Arriving at the diner and ordering noodles, he picked up a plate of noodles and just started eating it, thinking that he doesn't know why he lives because he doesn't even save money. And so, sitting at the station, full of fatigue, he understands that it is hard for him. Meanwhile, the last train arrived at the station. The people who were on the platform began to approach the train. And Itsuki Shinomiya was still thinking about the parallel universe and what would happen if he got there. He was thinking about the fact that he hadn't watched anime for a long time. He was thinking about the girls from there, and he imagined how he was with them, that he was also a hero. He thought about who he would be, maybe an adventurer or a hero. What would he do? What would he do? Thoughts about work prevented him from being happy. He didn't want to work and overwork himself anymore. He wanted to have fun, but he couldn't do it. Waking up from his thoughts, or rather from his dream, he saw that he was alone on the platform and the last train was in front of him. Jumping up from his seat, he ran to the train, which seemed to be waiting for him, because it had not yet started moving. He managed to jump into the carriage and exhaled because he almost missed it. A girl greeted him. She knew his name and was glad to meet him. And the guy was just surprised and began to look at her. She looked like a goddess from anime. The girl smiled and told Itsuki that he would be sent to a parallel universe. He thought it was some kind of trick and did not want to participate in it. The girl began to ask him to stop, snapped her fingers, and Itsuki began to fall. The goddess wanted to send him to another world where he could start a second life. She wanted to give him something before he left, because he would need it there. She wanted to give him a skill. Cards appeared in front of Itsuki. He couldn't believe that his second life was about to begin. The goddess gave him a choice, and tried to assure Itsuki that it would certainly help him. The protagonist thought about skills and a parallel universe. He wondered if it was really so. Itsuki Shinomi thought that any crude insect-like skills wouldn't be very good, so he was thinking of choosing offensive skills, or skills that specialized in combat. Then the hero thought that this choice would be wrong, so he chooses something completely different. He says that in his second life he will live happily, and he chooses this skill. The goddess tried to dissuade Itsuki from this card, wanted to offer a more useful alternative. But he was confident in his choice. She decided to make sure of his choice, and having endowed him with the skill of fun, asked him to be careful, at the same time sending him to the starting city. Opening his eyes, Itsuki found himself in another world. He immediately felt something behind him. There was a huge caterpillar. Itsuki immediately ran under the roar of the huge caterpillar. He thinks that the goddess has deceived him. Thinking that this is clearly not what he wanted, Itsuki stumbles and falls. But then someone shouted behind him to lie down, and behind him there was a loud roar of this caterpillar. Turning his head, Itsuki saw a guy with a sword. This guy was worried that he might not be able to help in time. He wanted to know who this guy was. And the guy in turn asked Itsuki if everything was okay. Itsuki was grateful to the guy, Hayato Hayakawa, and Hayato only cared about Itsuki's safety. Hayato introduced himself as a vagabond, drawing a comparison with Itsuki. As it turns out, Hayato was also reincarnated in this world. A girl approached them. She turned to Hayato, asking who the guy next to him was. Itsuki introduced himself to the girl, a little embarrassed. There were 4 pretty girls standing in front of the guys. Itsuki smiled, and the girls started asking Hayato about Itsuki. The boy was lost in his dreams. He started thinking about his harem with these girls. In his dreams, they were almost naked, sitting around him and addressing him as a king. Itsuki's thoughts were interrupted by Hayato, who said that they were going to the city. Hayato started talking about Japan, and felt nostalgic. One of the girls asked Hayato about Japan, and she thought it was his hometown. As it turned out, it was. Hayato asked Itsuki what unique skill the goddess gave him. Itsuki grinned and said that everyone would be surprised when he told them. Itsuki stretched out his hand and tried to summon pocket money with a satisfied face. A coin appeared in his hand. Everyone was really surprised. Itsuki began bragging that he earned a fixed amount of money per day depending on his level and didn't have to work. Hayato was a little embarrassed and asked Itsuki what he was going to do next. And Itsuki in turn continued to talk about his skill. He bragged that he could earn as much as he wanted. Everyone was confused except Itsuki, who continued to tell what skills the goddess had given him. While the group was discussing what to do next, the city they were going to was getting closer. Hayato suggested a guild, Itsuki liked it, then it was suggested to take up alchemy, and he approved of the idea. They noticed a city approaching. They were riding along the road in a horse-drawn cart. Looking out of the cart, they saw a picturesque view. They were met by a high fence made of stone, and behind the walls was a large city. The boys began to enter the city with joyful cries. Getting out of the cart, Itsuki began to walk along the streets looking at the inhabitants. His gaze stopped on two spectacular girls. He happily thought about how good it would be for him to live surrounded by such beautiful women. Finally, he came to the conclusion that he would live peacefully and happily because he had nowhere to rush. Itsuki realized that in this world, his life had finally begun. On a not very busy street near a street restaurant, Itsuki ordered himself some beef shashlik. While eating the kebab, he looked at the map that Hayato gave him. Itsuki was looking for the Alchemist's Guild. He was curious about what would happen there. Itsuki also really liked the beef he was eating. Someone pulled Itsuki by the shirt. He turned around and saw a girl with cat ears. Itsuki thought that the girl was lost and offered his shashlik, and the girl was not going to refuse. The cat girl had a strange appearance. She was wearing almost no clothes and had a collar around her neck. A man ran towards them and asked the cat girl to stop. The man told Itsuki that she couldn't be fed without permission because she was a servant, and Itsuki was scared and didn't know what to do. He didn't understand how this little girl could already be a servant. Wasn't she too young for that? The man wanted to know if he wanted to buy his servant. As it turned out, he was a dealer in illegal goods, and his name was Yasus. Itsuki became serious and exclaimed in a rough voice that he didn't like it. After his words, he thought, Itsuki couldn't even imagine that there was such a thing here. The girl looked at him. Itsuki distracted Yasus with a big caterpillar, which of course wasn't there. And it worked. The merchant was distracted, and Itsuki gave his beef to the girl and asked her to eat it quickly. The merchant screamed again and asked her to stop. The girl quickly began to eat the shashlik, and Itsuki had already run away, saying goodbye and waving his hand. A two-story building rose up in front of Itsuki. It was the Alchemist's Guild. He stood in front of the door, looking at the building. Hayato warned Itsuki to make a guild card and keep it with him at all times. Itsuki remembered this and decided to come in. Standing at the threshold, he examined the room and made sure there was someone in the house. He went in, closed the door, and, embarrassed, apologized. In response, he was told not to be so stupid. In front of Itsuki sat an old woman with a phone. She was unhappy that Itsuki was noisy because she could hear him perfectly well. The woman, with the same displeased face, asked what he wanted in her guild. Itsuki was scared, even a little afraid. Beads of sweat appeared on his face. After gathering his thoughts, Itsuki told the woman that he wanted to join the Alchemist's Guild. Itsuki introduced himself and said that he got here thanks to Hayato. The dissatisfied woman remembered Hayato and said that he didn't have to bring a letter of recommendation. She had already heard of Itsuki and knew about his problems with the aristocracy. She said in a low voice that his name began with flower. This confused Itsuki again. The woman took out a card and handed it to Itsuki. He wanted to take it, but as soon as he grabbed it, he felt a heat in his hand. When the two hands touched, a fire burst out. Itsuki screamed, seeing the fire on his hand. A card appeared from his hand. It was a guild card. The woman warned him that they didn't have any special exams, since he had just arrived. Itsuki wasn't prepared for that. He happily held the card, and finally, he realized how happy he was in this world, and the woman reminded him of the registration fee of 5,000 Nora. Itsuki put his hands on the table and asked to be taught. He wanted to learn alchemy. The woman introduced herself. Her name was Reinrich. They looked at each other, and Itsuki started apologizing, continuing to ask Reinrich to teach him alchemy, and she thought that Itsuki had changed his mind about alchemy. She said that it was mean, and she didn't like it when people went back on their word. But the master thought about it and thought that Itsuki did have alchemy skills after all, and she decided to give the first lesson. Reinrich walked ahead in the hallway. She wanted to see what Itsuki could do. He followed her. In front of them was a table with test tubes, flasks, burners, and a mortar for grinding. The master asked him to prepare a basic potion. Itsuki was grinding leaves in a mortar. The master instructed him that without constant practice, his instant magic would be useless. Itsuki didn't understand why he couldn't just use his magic. He tried to understand why he had to do it manually. And Reinrich kept saying that he needed to learn the basics first. The master looked at Itsuki with a smirk and told him to practice more. It will turn out better that way. Reinrich held the bottle in her hand and used it as an example of how it affected the success rate of a skill. Itsuki was so surprised that he even opened his mouth. Many variations of what was in the bottle were going on in his head. He awkwardly asked if it was a potion, but he still didn't get an answer. The master began to explain that the basics of alchemy were separation, conjunction, and coagulation, and if he could not understand this, he would not be able to go further. Itsuki replied that he understood the master's words. Reinrich tried to convey that everything didn't need to be remembered, that his body had to... Itsuki interrupted her and didn't let her finish. He understood everything. Itsuki decided to start with separation because it is the basis of alchemy. He needed ore, but he was in a hurry and understood everything. Standing at the table, he was trying hard to do something. Reinrich was watching this closely. Sweat was appearing on Itsuki's face from his efforts. And so he made the potion, wanted to show it to Reinrich, waited for her answer with a little fear. The master shook her head negatively. The potion did not work. The woman gave Itsuki a textbook, and he tried hard to understand something. His thoughts were all jumbled up, and he just started to feel hopeless. Itsuki tried to collect his thoughts and realized that he needed to do more. It was getting on for the evening. He was still puffing away at his alchemy textbook and trying to create something. He finally came to the conclusion that he couldn't do it anymore. The boy was already completely tired. He couldn't catch his breath sitting on the floor. He simply didn't have the strength to continue. Reinrich noticed something with a smile. She discovered that Itsuki had made several good potions. The door opened and a girl with a basket appeared behind it. Her name was Right. She was the master's assistant and lived in this house. Reinrich asked Right to cook something for Itsuki because he was completely exhausted. Greedily eating the freshly prepared food and slurping with pleasure, he did not notice at first how he was addressed. The master asked for a break as they needed to talk. With his mouth full, Itsuki glanced to the right. There was Wreath holding 2 cups of tea. He awkwardly began shaking his head and thanked her. He was clearly embarrassed. The master sipped some tea and asked him to listen to her while Itsuki ate. She realized something while he was practicing. Reinrich took another sip. She looked serious, and then her face changed. She said with a little smile that he shouldn't work here. Itsuki was taken aback, his mouth gaped, and the spoon that was heading towards his mouth hung in the air. And the master was angrily surprised by his face. But she still decided to rent a bed for him so Itsuki could stay. The only thing is that Reinrich will later set a price for the accommodation. The guy was surprised. He did not expect that he would have to pay for the accommodation. The woman said that she would go to the Adventure Guild tomorrow to sell his potions, because she guarantees the quality. Itsuki was surprised again because his potions weren't good enough to put up for sale. The moon has already risen in the sky, the stars are shining brightly, and in the guild house, the conversations are still going on. Itsuki was offered a low-class room because they are cheap, and he has almost no money anyway. Therefore, his potions will be sold. Morning came. The city was slowly waking up, but cries for help were heard in the streets. A woman was calling for help. Her luggage was stolen. She asked to stop the thief, but he hid in the crowd. People turned around in fear at the screams, and they realized that a theft had occurred. The thief ran down the street holding a knife in his hand, shouting at everyone to get out of his way, otherwise he would kill those who stood in his way. But there were 2 girls standing in front of him. He was about to swing the knife, shouting that they were getting out. But one girl gave a sign to the other, whose name was Sorte. She fleetingly grabbed the handle behind her back. Sorte effortlessly hit the thief on the shoulder, throwing the bag off his shoulder. He winced in pain and began to cough. The second girl immediately appeared next to the thief, and without thinking hit him in the stomach. And the man began to shower them both with curses. The girl grabbed his hand and threw him over her shoulder. The man clearly did not expect this, and fell to the ground in fear. Sorte praised the girl's work. Her work was excellent, and the girl exhaled because she needed to catch her breath. Ain immediately became embarrassed. She thought that she had overdone it a bit. And Sorte immediately reassured her that the thief was still breathing. People started chatting happily. They know these girls. The girls presented the bag to the woman from whom it was stolen. The woman was very grateful to the girls. Reinrich and Itsuki stood in the alley and wondered what happened there because there was a large crowd at the end of the alley. The master pointed out the way he could find the Adventurers Guild. She pointed straight ahead and said that she could not linger any longer. They said goodbye and went their separate ways. Itsuki came to the right place. He never thought that he could do business until he came to this world. At night, in the small room, snoring was heard. Itsuki slept, hugging a pillow. At the same time, Reinrich and Hayato were talking, sitting on the balcony. The master thought the moon was terrible today, and Hayato remembered that it was the same when he came to this world. Reinrich held a mug in her hand and drank a little. She wondered what Hayato needed at such a late hour. But the boy wanted to give Itsuki something. He had a small bag in his hands. He asked for this small favor. Hayato just wanted to help him out a little because he was a good guy and just wanted to show his gratitude. The guy put the bag on the table and waited for the master to take it for himself, but she only asked if he really thought so. Itsuki stood at the threshold of the guild with a bag in his hands. It held all the potions he had made. He thought it was convenient. He thought that Hayato might wake him up for this. He even thought that he was shy. The guy opened the doors of the guild, clearly confident in himself and eager to get down to business as soon as possible. Entering the room, he found himself in a room. The place was crowded and noisy. Different things were happening at each table. Someone was fighting, someone was drinking, someone was discussing something. Many people started turning to look at Itsuki, looking at him questioningly. He was like a black sheep among people who had seen a lot. He smiled awkwardly. Sweat appeared on his face from embarrassment. He greeted him, stumbling a little. Itsuki's face darkened, and he thought that this was a terrible place. And he repeated a little paranoidly that he didn't care. He felt strange, surprised looks as he passed the tables. He had a bad feeling about this. The people sitting at the tables were whispering. They were discussing the bag hanging on his belt. The people realized that he was from the Guild of Love Spells. Itsuki noticed the girl standing behind the counter, and he thought that she could help him. She had a cute appearance, and she asked him with a smile if he needed anything. The girl embarrassed Itsuki. She leaned cutely on the counter, supporting her cheeks with her hands. He began to stutter and tried to say what he wanted. Finally, he said that he wanted to sell potions, and, without finishing the sentence, reached for his bag. Itsuki began to display his potions and filled the entire counter with them. He wanted to buy as much ore as he could and asked if it was possible. The people at the tables were talking. They saw the potions and their words before were confirmed. The man snorted discontentedly that they would sell expensive potions again. From the negotiations behind their backs, Itsuki felt awkward. He was embarrassed by the atmosphere, which was tense for a reason. The girl examined the potions and came to the conclusion that all these potions were of rather low quality. A male voice was heard behind Ichoki addressing the girl at the counter, Fair. Both of them looked at the man. The man approached the counter and continued his conversation with the girl, smiling. He was interested in potions of good qualities. The man suddenly raised his hand and hit Itsuki on the head, asking if he knew about it. Itsuki was so surprised by this turn of events that he hit the potions with his body. They began to fall to the floor, each prepared potion shattering with a clatter. Itsuki, almost lying on the counter, looked at the shards and spilled potions on the floor. Laughter echoed throughout the room. They shouted at him that he deserved it, that he was a man from the Love Spell Guild. They didn't want him selling potions here at all. Itsuki was lost in thought. He had worked so hard to make them. He was thinking so fast and frustrated. His work, his potions. Why was he from the Love Spell Guild? What were these people even saying? He recalled Master Reinrich's words that he had made good potions. He was already starting to be filled with anger. The man who had hit Itsuki swung at him again, calling him names and wanting to know what he would do now. Laughter rang out in the hall. He jumped up in rage and knocked the man's hand away. Itsuki turned to the man. He offered to fight him. Ferrer raised her hand and asked in a frightened voice to stop, asked that they not fight here. The man turned to Itsuki and offered to play. He had a smirk on his face and a saber in his hand. The guy was furious. He stood ready to fight. He was worried about the question, what was wrong with this bald guy? Itsuki raised his fist to punch, his fist filled with strong feelings as he destroyed his potions. He wanted to beat everything out of him. A female voice rang out. Ain appeared between them. She stopped the saber with her sword and the fist with her arm guard. Ain was angry. She looked at the man angrily and asked him what he was doing. The man and the other people in the room were very surprised. He began to stutter a little. So he lowered his sword. Itsuki was also surprised by Aine's appearance. Then he was grabbed by the arm, which hurt him. It was Sorte who asked him to take his hand away. In the crowd between the two fighters stood two cute girls from the Scarlet Frontier. Itsuki thought about it. It was the first time he heard this name. He remembered that he saw her yesterday. Having looked at her closely, he realized how beautiful she was. Here the guy collected his thoughts and decided to clarify the situation regarding the recent incident. He explained that he was not from the Love Spell Guild, but from the Alchemist Guild. The people in the room stood there in confusion. Then Itsuki took out the guild card and showed it to everyone, and the man pointed to the bag. The man was surprised by what Ain said. She felt sorry because it was their fault that there was a misunderstanding. They didn't want to cause trouble for the Alchemist Guild. Itsuki was serious now. He didn't think it was a misunderstanding. He thought the man was to blame for not believing him at first and for breaking the potions. Here Sorte slammed her hands on the table, which surprised the guy. She didn't think it was gratitude to Ain for her help, and Ain tried to stop her. Then the girl approached Itsuki and said that it was not his fault. She decided to compensate for the destroyed potions and asked for forgiveness, which confused him. A woman appeared in the doorway, assessing the situation in the room. Everyone in the room turned around, and Reinrich was standing there. She angrily asked to listen to her. Since they destroyed their product, she would not let it go like this. Itsuki was also surprised by the master's appearance. She asked to speak to the guildmaster and turned towards the guy she wanted to talk to. Itsuki approached the master and apologized, because it was because of him that the potions were destroyed. To which Reinrich replied that everything was fine, and he did not need to worry so much. Reinrich didn't blame him, she blamed the people who did it. But Itsuki believed that he was also involved, to which the master confidently told him not to blame himself. The woman smirked and winked, saying that it was not he who should be tearing his hair out, but they. And Itsuki thought that it was easier to say, "Don't be sad," than to do it. Reinrich said that the Alchemist Guild would no longer deal with them, which left everyone shocked. To which the Adventure Guild master tried to dissuade her, because they did not want to buy potions from the Love Spell Guild. The man with the swords started making excuses. He should have checked his identity before attacking. He started apologizing too. Ferrer was just trying to apologize, like everyone else. But the master was adamant. She rudely addressed Aina. She tried to defend the honor of her student because he put his whole soul into preparing his potions. She wasn't going to tolerate such antics. She wanted to know what they were going to do now. Everyone was already sitting there scared, but Reinrich continued. Because there was a letter of recommendation from Hayato, she was sure that they knew what it meant. Everyone, as soon as they heard the name of the Dragon Slayer hero, they were simply horrified. Itsuki wondered in his mind, if this was the Hayato he knew, he would never have thought that he was such a celebrity here. The Adventurers Guild master understood everything, and those who caused the problem will be punished. And the man promised to pay 1 million Nora for the potions. Reinrich wasn't sure she heard it right. She thought they must have made a mistake, because the number they had said only had 1 digit. Sorte wanted to know why they had to pay such an exorbitant amount of money. Itsuki also thought it was too much. But the master defended the rights of the student, and Hayato stood by Itsuki. She was already tired of this, and no one understood. Itsuki tried to stop the master, because it was no longer clear who the victim was. And Reinrich told everyone to be silent. And Sorte tried to reason with the master so that she would listen to her student. Then Ain spoke up. She asked to wait and listen to her, because she understood that such a large sum could not be paid so easily. Sorte thought that she wanted to pay as much as was necessary. Ain swallowed, and Sorte began to worry. The red-haired girl wanted to become a servant and work off the money. Everyone was very surprised. Ain asked Reinrich to calm down, which surprised her. Itsuki asked what she meant. The man picked up and asked why she was taking on this burden, since it was his fault. The girl became serious and asked what he could do. The other man said that the reputation of the Adventurers Guild would be ruined if she became a servant. Ain didn't think so, because people needed an adventure guild, so the reputation wouldn't fall too much. Ferrier turned to the girl. She did not want her to become a servant, she thought it was all wrong. But Ain said that everything was fine and hugged Ferrier, everything would be fine with her. Itsuki approached Reinrich and asked why she did it, since the situation was somehow wrong. To which he received the answer that it was just the girl's own decision. Sorte shouted that she would not accept this. Ain tried to calm her down. But the girl did not calm down and said that because of the destroyed potions, her friend had to become a servant. Ain repeated that she would take responsibility. But Sorte was absolutely against it, because what would happen to their adventures? But the girl could take care of herself. And the cat girl asked, who will take care of the people if she leaves? Ain asked for leniency from the alchemist. Itsuki wanted to ask the master for help, but she indicated that she would not help him. Itsuki was lost in thought and denied everything, because he came here for a carefree, childish, happy life. First a giant insect, and then a servant. What should he do with her now? Finally, he refuses. Aini was surprised and wanted to know the reason, and he answered that it would just be a headache. Itsuki said that he doesn't see servitude as a solution to this situation. After all, he is safe now thanks to her, so he can't make his savior a servant. He asked not to worry. If anything, he will explain everything to Hayato. He makes more potions, because he already said that everything is fine. Aina asked him to wait, but Itsuki said it was okay. An argument broke out. The girl was confident in her strength, and she would be useful, and he did not want such a beautiful girl to become a servant. The girl was confused by his words. She? A beautiful girl? Sorte was already furious, which surprised Itsuki. And Reinrich was discussing such a candidate, a girl from the Scarlet Frontier as a servant. That's interesting. Itsuki tried to cut her off, but the master continued. Why not use her as a working hand? Itsuki became sad, but if you want to live and grow here, you need additional strength. Not in this way, he wants. And the master could no longer resolve this situation. She realized that he was too soft. She pointed at Ain and said that she would be waiting for her tomorrow morning. She wanted to see what she could do. Reinrich turned around and walked towards the doors. Itsuki tried to call out to her, but she simply said, "Let's go." Everyone else stood silently. Night came. Itsuki was very tired and sat down on the bed. He was going to sleep. After all, it was a hard day. He was not sure if he could live here. Humming a song, he lay down on the pillow. As the morning came, he felt a weight on his shoulder. His arm went numb and smelled nice. He was scared when he saw Aina in his arms, almost naked. He screamed and asked what she was doing there. Ain didn't know what to answer, but after collecting her thoughts, she said that, according to Reinrich, it was a duty. Itsuki was angry with the master. He closed his eyes and asked her to get dressed. But Ain thought that something was wrong, that she was not good enough. And Itsuki immediately refuted her words. And Ain apologized. Sorte's head appeared at the door of the room. She immediately yelled at Aine and did a forward somersault and kicked Itsuki in the face, saying that this was instant punishment. Itsuki, with a bloody nose, asked what she was doing. Sorte simply called him an animal and that she would protect Aine from him. He tried to explain, but Sorte didn't even give him a chance. At that moment, Aina asked them to calm down, and Reinrich said that it was good to be young and drank tea with Right, smiling. Itsuki Shinomiya was lost in his memories. He was sent to another world by a goddess, and remembered her words that he should do his best. He remembered the giant caterpillar, the mockery that happened by mistake, and now he met a girl who is trying to become his servant. There aren't many people in the room. There's a group sitting at one of the tables. Ain tells him that after eating, they'll go to the merchant Z. In response, he asks her if she's sure about that. Aini appears confused and talks about how she must determine her value as a servant. Turning to Itsuki, Aini calls him master and asks him to take care of her. Itsuki tells Aine that he doesn't like the sound of it. Ain is surprised and upset. The girl asks what exactly he doesn't like. She thought that Itsuki didn't like that Aina called him master, and that it sounds rude. The girl began to think of different ways she could address Itsuki. She suggested calling him Lord, dear, sweetheart, or my liege. Itsuki was shocked that a girl like Aini was saying this to him. The girl continued to try to find a way to address him. Ain said that it was too early to do so, but she could call him my precious. The guy is confused. He starts stuttering and asks the girl to stop. Ain sighs thoughtfully. A confused Aine begins to tell Itsuki that her race has a rule that says they call their husband that after their first night. At this point, Sorte angrily hits the piece of food on her plate with her fork. She is irritated and says that there is no need for this. The girl fiercely showed that she does not want her friend to be Itsuki's servant. Sorte confidently says that she will soon buy Aina's freedom back. The girl screams and almost cries. It seemed that she was about to have a fit. The boys leave the establishment and walk down the street. Itsuki asks Sorte if she really wants to buy Aina back. The girls walk next to each other. Sorte hugs Aina, showing his concern and willingness to protect her. She, almost screaming, answers Itsuki's question and says that she is certainly ready to buy her friend. Ain looks at Sorte and says that she cannot do that, because then her sincerity will not be conveyed. Itsuki interrupts the girls' dialogue and tells them with displeasure that he still needs money. Sorte is very angry, and Aine looks at the guy questioningly. A sad Ain turns to her friend and says that she is glad that Sorte is worried about her, but she will not change her mind. She falls into despair and goes into her friend's arms. The girl claims that she will go with her. At this moment, Itsuki is confused, wondering why Sorte is so stubborn. Sorte suddenly turns towards Itsuki, pointing at him. She says that she will go with her so that he will not cause her any harm. The boys continue walking through the streets of the city. Itsuki asks Aine if she still wants to go to the servant merchant. The girl tells him that she has not changed her mind yet, still addressing him as my lord. Itsuki walked and thought about why she kept calling him. That, because this girl seemed pretty good to him, he felt sorry for her. And he also didn't understand what she wanted to achieve by doing this. 4 men are sitting in the Adventurers Guild headquarters, discussing something. The men look confused and sad. A disgruntled Ferrer approaches them and asks what they are doing. She asked this question because the men had been gloomy since the morning. One of the men wanted to say something about Aina, but then he caught his breath because he was very sad. Ferrer turns to the man and says that she can understand his feelings, but that thinking about it all day won't help, since Aina left this place for them. After these words, the girl became very sad. Tears welled up in Ferrer's eyes. She asked the man what he could do for Aina. The man looked at her with sadness, but also inspiration. And then the men started supporting the girl. They started saying that she was right, that it was their fault, and now they had to work hard. They decided to get to work quickly, remembering that there were a lot of requests that day. Master Reinrich approaches the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Then Master Shi turns around, as if she heard something. She meets a man she knows. He tells her that it has been a long time since he last visited a gun shop. The gunsmith asks him about his life. He tells her that he is doing quite well. The man tells her that he heard that she has a new student, and he asks if it is true. Reinrich tells him that it is true. In response, the man says that it is wonderful, and asks if he is good at teaching. Itsuki and the girls arrive at the place they were heading to. Itsuki says that it's quite an interesting place. The guys are surprised by the beautiful mansion they found themselves in front of. The 2-story building looked magnificent. It resembled some kind of palace. Itsuki tells the girls that he thought the mansion belonged to an aristocrat, but it turned out to be a merchant's servant's house. The young man admires its beauty. He knocks and enters the mansion. A beautiful girl appears in front of him, invites him in, and apologizes for the wait. The girl looked so beautiful that it seemed she was a real princess of this palace. The girl assumed that Itsuki came to her from Reinrich and invited him to follow her. Itsuki was delighted by the beauty of this girl. It turned out that the outside was amazing, but the inside was even better. The group settled down on a sofa in the merchant's huge office, and then a man Itsuki already knew came out to them. He was friendly and apologized for the delay. The man began to talk about how he had heard about Itsuki from Reinrich and then thanked him for choosing their company. Itsuki informed the man that he seemed to have seen him the other day. The man introduced himself. His name was Lord Yasis. He sat down opposite the boys. The girl who greeted Itsuki at the entrance to the mansion brought hot tea. Itsuki thanked the girl with embarrassment. Itsuki was worried. He thought that Aina was very pretty, but this was just torture. He was not eager to have such a cute girl become his servant. Then Yasis turned to him and began to look at him. Yasis, smiling slyly, asked the guy if he liked the girl who met him. Itsuki blushed. Then the guy felt ashamed. He said not to pay attention to him. The owner of the mansion introduced her. The girl's name was Wendy. Itsuki thought that this world was mocking him. He did not understand how this girl could be a servant. The guy felt completely ashamed and uncomfortable. It even hurt him. Here Sorte asked Yasis to speed up the process. Yasis looked at them with bewilderment and tried to calm Itsuki down. The merchant informed the girls that he would now evaluate their value as servants. Ain reluctantly agreed. She was upset and scared. Yasis began to examine the girls, said that they were in good condition. He was incredibly shocked when he found out that these two girls were from the Scarlet Frontier. Suddenly, Sorte exclaimed, she did not understand why she was also counted. Yasis began to explain everything. He had heard the details from Reinrich, and the amount of money was quite large. Aina alone would not be enough to cover it. The merchant continued to explain that if Aina served and worked alone, it would be very hard for her, and Sorte could ease her burden by becoming a servant. Sorte said that she understood everything. She was unbearably sad. Ain was also very upset for her friend. Sorte had tears in her eyes, but she seemed to have resigned herself. She told Aina that everything was fine and asked if they would be together forever. She didn't need Aina's answer. She could read everything in her eyes. Sorte stood up proudly and said that she agreed to become a servant. And then Wendy invited them to come with her. Yasis said that he would now tell Itsuki about the servants. The boy began to listen. The merchant explained that there were several types of servants. Debt servants were bought and sold for economic reasons. Criminal servants were guilty of crimes and were forced to become servants. And there are also special servants who become servants for royal, tribal, or special reasons. In this case, they are debt servants. Itsuki listened carefully and understood everything. As Wendy entered the small room, she announced loudly that the evaluation would begin right now. First of all, she asked if they were strong in battle, since the girls were known as adventurers. Aina and Sorte felt awkward and admitted that they weren't particularly strong in combat. Then Wendy asked if they could cook, and the girls said that they only cooked when they were traveling. Then Wendy asked if they had any experience in housekeeping. The girl did not wait for their answer, understanding without words. She smiled sweetly at them and told them to take off their clothes. Ain and Sorte were shocked. They didn't know that they would have to do this. They were very uncomfortable. But despite this, they obediently continued to do what they had to do. At this point, the girls felt embarrassed. The girls took off their clothes, leaving their underwear. Wendy came up to them and said to check. The girls blushed and felt extremely uncomfortable. Wendy thanked them, came closer, and asked them to turn their backs to her. The girls did not understand why she needed this, but obediently turned away from her. Wendy came up to Aina from behind and hugged her, making her feel embarrassed. She immediately apologized to her in a sweet voice. Ain was confused by Wendy's unexpected action. She felt very awkward and didn't know what to do with herself. The girl just wanted to fall through the floor from shame. Wendy explained to her that there were different types of servants, but if her master demanded it, she had to do it. Being able to please her lord meant high praise. All this time, Sorte, who was watching this, was in shock. She was discouraged by everything, both the fact that she was watching this and the fact that she too was awaiting such an assessment. Wendy noted that Ain seemed inexperienced and began to stroke her inner thigh. Ain was already blushing from everything that was happening. She wanted it all to end. It seemed that just a little more, and the girl would burst into tears from hopelessness. Unexpectedly for everyone, at that moment, Sorte runs up from behind and pushes Wendy in the back. The girl wanted to stop all this. She screamed and asked for it. The girls fell to the floor from the girl's push. Wendy looked at her in bewilderment. Ain was shocked by her action, but at the same time, she was grateful to her. Wendy looked at Sorte with a sly smile. She said that it looked like she wouldn't get any money here. The girl stuck out her tongue, teasing Sorte with this gesture. She was, of course, ashamed, but she was pleased that she was able to stop this strange assessment. Yasis was telling Itsuki about the contract with the servants all this time. The boy listened attentively and remembered everything. Wendy knocked on their door and apologized for keeping them waiting for so long. She led the girls into the men's office and said that the evaluation was ready, thanking them for their patience. Aine and Sorte looked very sad. Itsuki immediately noticed this and asked what happened to them. In response to his question, a joyless Aine asked him not to ask her questions. Itsuki did not understand why he should not ask questions and asked what the reason was. In response to this, Sorte exclaimed, she pounced on him with screams and reminded him that Aine had asked him not to ask any questions. But Itsuki still did not understand what was happening. A confused Yasis starts looking at the paper on which the girl's evaluation is written. A confused Aine looks at Yasis while he announces the results of her evaluation. It is obvious that the girl is worried. Then the merchant begins to announce the results of the second girl. Sorte is irritated and dissatisfied. Yasis tells Itsuki that both girls are capable of fighting, but they cannot do housework. The merchant says that Aine's results are correct, and asks if one of Sorte's results is actually negative. Wendy confirms this and begins to talk about her. She says that the girl is an adult from the tribe of wolf people, but still underdeveloped. Sorte felt ashamed. She did not like the fact that Wendy was talking like that. She believed that it was none of their business. Here Wendy began to tell about how Sorte performed the sexual intercourse assessment. The girl was completely embarrassed. She did not know what to do with herself. Wendy came up behind Sorte and hugged her hips. Sorte screamed, asking her to stop this. Wendy continued hugging Sorte, changing the position of her arms. The girl does not like this at all, and she wants it to end. Wendy hugged the girl just above the waist. Unexpectedly for her, Sorte burst out laughing. She felt very ticklish. Wendy tells how Sorte reacted to the assessment, explaining that it would be hard for the partner. Yasis calmly listened to the girl. And Itsuki at that moment was surprised to himself that she turned out to be a wolf, because he thought Sorte was a dog. Wendy announced that the assessment had now reached the amount of compensation for the esteemed client. Aine's value was 6 million nor, and Sorte's was 4 million nor. Yasis suggested that they start the contract ceremony quickly. He invited everyone to form a circle and fold their hands. The guys obediently agreed and did everything as he asked. The boys folded their hands and asked the merchant if they were doing everything right. Yasis replied that everything was right and then suggested they begin. The drawing they were standing on lit up. The back of their hand lit up, and then a drawing of a coat of arms appeared there. Itsuki's palm was glowing. He was wondering if the ceremony was over, to which Yasis said that the contract had been successfully concluded. The girl's palms were also glowing. The merchant began to explain that the contract was strong because it bound the relationship with the help of a skill. Yasis continued to explain that the contract prevented servants from harming the master or harboring hostility towards him, a safety feature, one might say. Itsuki was surprised by this. He didn't believe it, so he turned to Sorte and asked her to check it out. Before he could say it, she swung her spear at Itsuki. Suddenly, Sorte felt sick and in pain. She was unable to harm Itsuki. Sorte and Aine fell to the floor and clutched their heads. Yasis explained that if the girls tried to harm him, they would suffer from severe headaches. Itsuki didn't expect this and felt ashamed in front of the girls. Sorte started to get up, and Itsuki asked her if she was okay. Itsuki told Sorte that after learning a lesson, she would reconsider her behavior, immediately relying on brute force, calling her a dog girl. Sorte looked at him menacingly and exclaimed that she was not a dog, but a wolf. Aine started laughing as she watched them. Sorte and Itsuki turned to her and looked at her in surprise. Aine apologized and said that it seemed like they were both having fun. Itsuki and Sorte were annoyed and shouted in one voice that they were not having fun. Yasis repeated that the contract was over. He thanked the guys and told them to come again. They left the mansion and thought about what to do next. Aine turned to Itsuki and asked him to meet the Adventurers Guild to report. The boy thought about it. It's night outside. Hayato is looking at the starry sky. The girls are sitting by the fire where food is being cooked. One of them says that Hayato hasn't returned yet. The second cat girl is surprised that Hayato is late. She states that she is hungry and wants to eat meat. The first girl says that for the meat, you will have to wait for the next city. The cat girl is upset about this. The cat girl remembers that there was jerky and starts looking for it. She says that she will put it in the soup. The other girl tells her that it is for a rainy day and asks her not to do it. A third girl approaches them. She is naked. Drops of water are running down her body. The girl asks not to put meat in the soup, explaining that she will not be able to drink it. The first girl is very surprised and asks her what she is doing, calling her Emily. Emily doesn't understand why the girl is so surprised and tells her that she just went for a swim in the spring. The girl tells her that Hayato is already here and she shouldn't go around without clothes. She said she didn't care and asked the girl if she was too worried. The girl didn't understand why people like Emily, elves, behave like that. And in any case, Hayato hasn't returned yet. She tells her that Chris went to call him. Emily tells her friend, calling her Letty, that she smells a little and suggests that she take a bath, arguing that Hayato might not like it. Letty becomes very embarrassed, her face flushes. While Emily and Letty were arguing with each other, the cat girl was thinking only about meat, where to get it, and when she could eat it. It's already night outside. An owl is sitting on a tree branch, watching a sad boy sitting alone on a rock in the middle of the forest. Hayato looks at his palm, his eyes filled with longing. Tears well up in his eyes. Suddenly, a man comes up to him from behind and puts a blanket on his shoulders. Hayato is frightened by this unexpected action. He says that a light wind has risen and the body will freeze. Turning back to see who it was, he sees Chris in front of him. He was happy when he saw her and thanked her. After that, Chris became embarrassed for some reason. They looked at the beautiful mountains in front of them together. Hayato mentioned Itsuki. He hoped he was okay. Everyone was having fun in the Adventure Guild. A man came up to Itsuki and put his arm around his shoulders in a friendly manner. He told him that they had worked hard today and that he was being treated. Itsuki responded by saying that he would pay for it himself. The guild members stand before him and make a small bow, apologizing to him. Itsuki says that he expected to receive an apology right away. In response, the men say that Aini showed the difference. They should do their best too. Everyone sat down at the tables and continued the dialogue. The men said that if Itsuki couldn't forgive them, then they were ready to be beaten up by his hands. To which the guy replied that he had many such situations in another world. The man confesses to him that he is a good man. Itsuki now relies on them, and the guild awaits the potions prepared by the alchemists. Suddenly, Sorte called out to Itsuki. The boy turned around. She was shouting at him that it was only because of the contract that he looked like he could do anything on his own. She told him not to get cocky. Itsuki didn't like the way Sorte was talking to him at all. He compared her to the clingy boss of the company where he used to work. Ain felt ashamed for her friend. She looked down and explained to him that Sorte had had a little too much to drink. Sorte suddenly burst into tears and threw herself into Aina's arms. She said that they were not going to be his comfort. Sorte thought that Itsuki was definitely going to do a lot of things. Sorte got very angry because of Itsuki's words. She started to talk about how she was not happy with Itsuki's words, because he had just insulted her appearance. It seemed like Sorte was about to explode from anger. She told Itsuki to apologize to him. Itsuki said that he wasn't going to do anything with the girls as servants. Sorte didn't believe him and assumed that he was just saying that. Itsuki suddenly became angry at this. He said that he was tired of this kind of relationship between the top and the bottom, and asked not to say absurd things. Aine and Sorte were surprised by this answer. The men called Itsuki to join them again. The boy agreed and went to them. The girls were left alone. Sorte was still gloomy from her conversation with Itsuki. She told Aine not to fall for that. In response, Aine simply agreed with it. Sorte took a few more sips from her mug. Tired, Sorte laid her head on the table, telling Aine that she was easy to do such things. Meanwhile, Itsuki and the men continued to have fun and relax. Aine thought about Sorte's words and confirmed them. She looked mysteriously towards Itsuki and continued to think. Itsuki was still having fun with the men. He exclaimed that the other world was cool. Everyone agreed with him. One of the men approached Itsuki and said that he had done such a luxury, then asked if everything was okay with the payment. Itsuki replied that they should not worry and would now show them his skill. Itsuki suddenly raised his hand palm up. Suddenly, a coin flew out of his palm. He caught it and showed it to everyone boastfully. The men were very impressed. Itsuki proudly showed everyone the coin and told them to get him a drink. The guy climbed onto the table and continued to brag about his skill, laughing loudly. One of the men said that Itsuki had a silver coin. The other was surprised that it was the only one. The men asked how many coins Itsuki had now. Pharaoh asked the men if it was okay to pay for it with their money. The men were confused by everything that was happening. Itsuki was still having fun. That night, the full moon shone in the starry sky, illuminating what seemed to be the entire city. The fun at the Adventure Guild headquarters was already over. The men fell asleep right at the tables. Itsuki was almost asleep too, but then thoughts came to him. He thought about how he had met different companies when he got to another world. He remembered the big fuss that had happened. He thought that the second life was not so bad. His measured life began from here. Itsuki remembered all the people he met on his way after being reborn. He did not understand how he died. He thought about the fact that for a number of reasons, he began a second life. He knocked on the door of the Adventure Guild headquarters and wished everyone there a good morning, saying that he was from the Alchemist Guild. The men turned and looked at him, greeted him, and asked if he was delivering potions. Itsuki confirmed this and then said with disapproval that they were drinking again. The men explained that there hadn't been any big requests lately, but there definitely were some for Scarlet Frontier. The guy looked at him questioningly. Itsuki thought again. He thought about how for some reason he now had servants from the Scarlet Frontier, female adventurers with amazing skills. He remembered how Ain said that she would become his servant and work off the money, and how Sorte was indignant that because of some broken potions, she had to become a servant. How the servants help him gather materials for alchemy. They are both busy with the work of adventurers and helping him. He remembered how Sorte was angry with him, saying that she would quickly pay off the debt and then bite him. His diligent studies in studying alchemy, such as making his own potions and accessories. He can now make recovery potions up to the intermediate level. He remembered that the level was increasing normally. The work was also being done in its own way, that he was not worried and was not in a hurry. He would develop little by little. It was morning. Itsuki had just woken up. He walked to the window, shaking his head, and began to think about what he should do today. Then he suddenly perked up, raised his hand up, and cast his spell, using his pocket money. As usual, a coin flew out of his palm. He caught it and squeezed it in his hand, and was pleased with his dexterity. Itsuki thought that his unique skill, pocket money, had also leveled up. It was now level 2, a one-time receipt of 10 times the original amount. He began to receive 1 gold coin. He thought that if the human's pocket could afford it, he would do only one thing. Itsuki was inspired. He planned to have fun today. Itsuki thought that when he came to the other world, he intended to take his time, but he worked without stopping. Seeing Reinrika's face in the dark alchemy room, he remembered how she made him work hard. He thought that he was tired. He thought about how he still didn't know the city of Einziel. Then surely there must be places where one could have fun with beautiful girls. He wondered if it could be said that this was a trading city. Itsuki ran down the city street. He was in a very good mood. He shouted, warning everyone to expect entertainment, said that he would do it. Itsuki took a hot dog that looked delicious, sat down on a bench, and suggested thinking. He wanted to replenish his strength first. If you think about it, he doesn't know the area at all except the route to and from work. While Itsuki was eating, he thought about how inconvenient it was to have a city map and wondered where he could get one. Suddenly he noticed something and looked around. In front of him, Itsuki saw Yesus and Wendy. The man immediately recognized his client, and the guy greeted him. Wendy reminded Itsuki of her name and wished him good morning. Itsuki admired her beauty and thought what a delight for the eyes in the morning, then wished her good morning in return. Yesus turned to Itsuki and asked if he had been out since early morning. The guy said that he had a day off today and wanted to tell him that he was going to have some fun, but changed his mind. Instead, he went out to do some shopping, but he wasn't very familiar with the city. The merchant listened to the boy and told him that Wendy could show him around. Itsuki wasn't expecting such an offer of help. Yesus told about how he heard that Itsuki had recently arrived in their city and had various concerns. The merchant asked Itsuki if he wanted to heal his daily fatigue with Wendy today. Wendy noticed Itsuki's strange reaction and thought that he was not satisfied with her. Itsuki was at a loss, as he had never even dreamed of such a thing. He began shaking his head and denying Wendy's words. She turned to Itsuki and said that in that case, he should take care of her. Itsuki happily agreed. Itsuki began to tell Wendy about his plans for the day, and that the first thing he wanted to do was buy some new clothes. They came to a clothing store and the guy started picking out clothes. The first thing Itsuki did was try on a beautiful tailcoat and asked if it was too bright. Wendy disagreed and said that it suited him very well. The girl realized that Itsuki was not impressed by the suit and offered him to choose other things, to which the guy agreed. A girl came up to the guys from behind and called out to them. Wendy turned around and looked at her questioningly. Itsuki was still looking at his image in the mirror and thinking about how it was his first time shopping with a girl when Wendy called him and said that she had been offered some clothes. Itsuki looked at her with interest. The girl looked amazing in her new look. The girl who approached them asked Itsuki if he wanted to buy this outfit for Wendy. The sales girl expressed her opinion by saying that Wendy suits the outfit very well and that she is quite a pretty woman. Itsuki was delighted by Wendy's image and even became embarrassed. Wendy waited for the guy's answer, but he was staring at her. Itsuki was shocked by her beauty. He turned to the seller and told him to wrap up the outfits. The girl thanked him, reminding him that Itsuki also had to buy clothes. Wendy was very embarrassed. She apologized to Itsuki for having to buy clothes for her too, but he was only too happy to buy her a new outfit. After all, his clothes were on sale. Wendy thanks Itsuki and promises to wear his gift carefully. Itsuki thought about how he only slightly understood the feelings of people who fell for the seller's trick. Suddenly the girl said that it was her turn. The guy did not immediately understand what she was talking about and looked at her questioningly. Wendy looked at the boy and began to explain to him that today she wanted to give Itsuki a lot of healing. That was the order she had received from Yasis. Then she took his arm and suggested that they go somewhere. Itsuki and Wendy went into a cafe. They drank tea and discussed something. The guy thought about how exactly this measured life was what he wanted, coming to another world, to feel so sincerely relieved. Happy Itsuki and Wendy left the establishment, held hands and walked along the streets of the city. Suddenly, a man called out to the girl and looked at her indignantly. Itsuki didn't recognize the man and asked Wendy if she knew him. Wendy recognized him and wanted to introduce Itsuki. The man started yelling at the girl. He asked her what she was doing in such a place, and then asked Itsuki what he was doing. Itsuki began to explain to the man Wendy was showing him the city. The man got very angry. He asked Itsuki if he bought Wendy, and said that he would buy the girl. Wendy was scared by this and started hiding behind Itsuki. The guy told the stranger that Wendy was scared and asked him to stop screaming. The man began to tell Itsuki that Wendy did not need such a poor man, and he ordered her to move away. Itsuki didn't like this. He turned to Wendy and asked who he was. The girl answered, "His name is Dadaril. He is the son of an influential person in this city." The man continued to be indignant. He asked Itsuki who he was, then said that he was collecting 120 million Nora to buy out Wendy and asked if Itsuki had that kind of money. Itsuki turned to Wendy, not believing the man's words. Dadaril shouted that a commoner like Itsuki had no right to even approach Wendy. He then ordered Yasis to be called, while his assistants asked Dadaril to calm down. Itsuki didn't care about Dadaril's words. He hugged Wendy and confidently said that he would protect her. Dadaril and his assistants were shocked by Itsuki's words and actions. Aine and Sorte walked along a forest path and discussed the fact that they had gathered a very good harvest today. Sorte turned to Aine, saying that she was annoyed that, even though they had collected so much stuff, they still took it all to Itsuki. Aine replied that there was nothing she could do about it, since that was the contract. Aine said that if they didn't collect materials, it would be a hindrance to Itsuki's work. Sorte replied that Itsuki, even if he wasn't working, was reaching out to a woman somewhere under her nose at that time. Itsuki confidently shouted that he was Wendy's master now. Dadaril was very annoyed. He couldn't believe it. Wendy ran into Itsuki's arms and started apologizing to him. She felt guilty about everything that happened. Wendy suddenly pulled away from him. Itsuki got scared and asked if he had pressed her too hard. Dadaril continued to shout aggressively at Itsuki, repeated that he had no right to touch Wendy, and thought that Itsuki was going against him. Itsuki did not care about his strong emotions. He was completely unperturbed. Dadaril was surprised by Itsuki's reaction. And Itsuki repeated again that he didn't care, because he was already used to such people. Dadaril exclaimed that Itsuki would regret disobeying him, and Dadaril would never forgive him. Dadaril said that he would not give Wendy to anyone, to which Itsuki replied that he would not give Wendy to a man like him. There was great tension between the men when suddenly Wendy addressed Itsuki. Itsuki turned around and looked at Wendy questioningly. She asked if he was going to buy her. Itsuki did not expect such a question. Dadaril looked at them disapprovingly when suddenly a man approached them, recognizing Dadaril. In front of them stood Yasis, who recognized Itsuki. Dadaril was glad to see Yasis. He asked him for an explanation. Yasis asked Dadaril if he was really ready to buy Wendy by paying 120 million Nora for her. He was not ready for such a question, and without answering it, he asked who Itsuki was. Dadaril also asked why Wendy was with Itsuki. He thought the guy had bought her. Yasis explained everything to Dadaril, but he did not believe the merchant's words. Yasis said that he was telling the truth. Dadaril felt awkward, and Itsuki didn't understand what kind of person he was. The guy even thought that the man looked like Rainrich. Dadaril said that he would buy Wendy out anyway, so Itsuki shouldn't get close to the girl. Yasis reluctantly agreed with Dadaril and then turned his gaze to Itsuki. Yasis suggested that they compete with each other to determine who would get Wendy. Itsuki was shocked by the merchant's suggestion. The girls came to the alchemist's headquarters and were met by Rainrich. The master asked how the girls were doing. Aina asked Rainrich where Itsuki was now, to which she replied that Itsuki had locked himself in the back room. Sorte pushed the door with her foot and warned that they were coming in. Ain was surprised by her friend's action. The girls entered Itsuki's room and said that they had brought a batch of materials. The tired boy thanked them. Suddenly, Sorte noticed something on his desk. Sorte noticed the jewelry Itsuki had made. She was surprised by the amount of it. Aine asked Itsuki why he needed so many accessories. Sorte looked at the jewelry with admiration. Itsuki began to explain everything. Sorte took a deep breath and started yelling at Itsuki. The boy and Aine were scared by how loud it was. Itsuki asked Sorte not to shout so loudly, but she continued. She said that Dadaril's father was one of the influential people in the city, and it was impossible to quarrel with him. Sorte said that it was difficult to escape from him. Itsuki fell into despair, and again asked the girl not to yell at him. Sorte called Itsuki reckless because he only acts under influence. The boys continued to quarrel. Ain then spoke to them and told Sorte to stop screaming, explaining that Itsuki did it to save a woman. Sorte replied that Itsuki did it because Wendy was simply the servant merchant's most beautiful woman. Ain began to apologize to Itsuki, saying that she said it without any malice. Aina said that she and Sorte had agreed to show Itsuki around the city soon, but they had been beaten to it. Itsuki was surprised by this. Sorte began to deny Ain's words. She said that it was not about that. Itsuki apologized to the girl and wanted to hug her, but she was against it. Aina turned to Itsuki and asked what exactly the competition was about. The guy replied that they needed to collect money. He started telling about his plan, how he planned to earn 80 million in a short time. Sorte was shocked when she heard the amount mentioned. She did not understand how Wendy could be worth 30 times more than her. Sorte got angry and attacked Itsuki. Aine started to stop her friend. Itsuki asked the girls to gather materials for accessories for him. Aine and Sorte agreed to help him. Ain said that they would accompany Itsuki in their free time. Itsuki asked if the opponent was that strong. Ain thought about it and replied that there were bad rumors about this person. Itsuki said that during this time he was counting on the girls, and he would be selling potions wholesale to the Adventure Guild. Aine couldn't believe that he was willing to sell potions in such a difficult time. Itsuki replied that there was such a promise. The girl said that he was very kind. The girls were about to leave. Sorte still couldn't calm down. She said that she would hunt and gather. Itsuki wished them a safe journey. Wendy sat in the room and thought about something. She remembered telling Itsuki that she shouldn't agree to the competition. Itsuki didn't understand why she was so worried. He said that everything would be fine and patted her head. There was a knock on Wendy's door and they asked permission to come in. Yasis was standing in front of her. He asked how the girl was feeling. Wendy replied that there was no reason for it to be good. She didn't understand why he would offer Itsuki such a competition. Yasa said that he wanted to apologize for using her, but the current circumstances would be a good outcome for both of them. Wendy sat on the bed and talked to Giannis. The current circumstances were certainly suitable for the right direction, so Giannis asked not to worry. The girl was a little angry. It seemed to her that Yasis wanted to sell her at a high price to Mr. Dadaril. After all, she is a special servant and has the privilege of choosing her master herself. She felt like he was going to convince her to give up her privilege with this competition. They glared at each other, and Giannis wondered if she had had fun today. Wendy remembered Itsuki's face and pressed her hands to her chest, saying that she had a very pleasant time. And Giannis said that she must do everything to make this happiness a reality. She jumped up and asked in a loud voice why he had proposed such a competition. She was amazed at how 80 million burros could be collected in 1 week. Yassi softened and thought that Wendy thought it was impossible for him. He immediately assured her that this client was not the type to leave her easily. Wendy was embarrassed, but he smiled. Itsuki sat at the table and continued to tinker. Fragments of phrases could be heard. Planning of affairs, good circumstances for both them and him. Holding the hammer in his hands, he exhaled and felt that his hands were numb. Reinrich entered the room and suggested that they take a break, because if they worked too long, the work would become sloppy. The craftswoman noticed the jewelry and noted that he had made quite a lot of it. She assumed that he wanted to open an accessories store. Sitting at the table with mugs of tea and treats, she continued that she had heard the story in general terms from the girls. Itsuki looked at the master, because at first she thought that young people were reckless, but he was always having conflicts with someone. He took the mug, drank some tea, and doubtfully confirmed the words while pointing out that he was no longer so young. Reinrich interrupted him, asking him to be silent, because she saw only a fat child here. Reith came to the table and asked if he needed more. Itsuki thanked him and continued talking to the master. He needed her advice. Taking the cookie, he thought about the fact that there was a limit to how much he could earn from accessories alone, and, apologizing, expressed his opinion that he wanted to sell potions outside of the Alchemist Guild. Reinrich thought about his words. He thought that it was impossible, but the master said that it was not the matter. She asked if he knew what the boy Dadaril was selling. Itsuki became interested. He even thought that a pig farm. The woman said that he just looked like that and that he shouldn't interfere with the story, because this pig is the head of the pharmaceutical guild. Itsuki had a revelation, and realizing this, the master said that he would intervene if he tried to make money on potions. The guy slapped himself in the face, realizing the hopelessness of this situation. But Reinrich thought that in that case it would be a good idea to expand the business beyond potions. Itsuki thought about it. He took his card and tried to contact Hayato. The guy managed to do it, and Hayato said that they hadn't talked for a long time. At this time, the monster was advancing on his team. He asked Itsuki how he could help him, and Itsuki just wanted to ask something. Letty and Chris, who were sitting behind a rock, shouted to Hayato that the monster was approaching. Itsuki wanted to make sure that it was convenient for him to speak. Hayato didn't see any problems, even though a huge bird flew up over his team's heads. Everyone rushed into battle, and Itsuki asked about the bag he had given him. He wondered if he could use it. The girls fought various monsters. Chris had magic, and the cat girl was an excellent swordsman. The bird flew towards Letty, and she ordered everyone to step aside. Hayato didn't mind him using the contents of the bag. He could use everything as he wanted. The bird flew up and let out a cry. Hayato continued to discuss the items in the bag, warning him that some of the items in the bag he would not be able to use due to his level. Itsuki warned that he would manage somehow, which surprised Hayato. He was amazed that he would manage in a short time. The guy said that he was doing his best, and this time he would bring the ore he got from the dungeon. Hayato ran towards the bird and pierced the monster with his sword. It was as if he flew through her. A bird's cry was heard, and it was as if a hole had been drilled through her. Hayato waited impatiently for the results from Itsuki, which he did not believe at first, but Hayato confirmed his words. The girls behind him rejoiced. Itsuki said goodbye and realized that the guild card was convenient, because you could talk to a registered interlocutor no matter where he was. It was like a mobile phone. And so he sat at the table again. Stretching from fatigue, he continued to work. He put on the eyepiece and began to polish his accessories, knocked, ate, and slept at the table. The girls were chasing a boar. Sorte was chasing it and wanted to catch it calmly. Ain was trying to figure out if they were close. She also pointed out that they had enough materials and could slowly return. Sorte approved of this idea as it would relieve stress. Ain said that the gentleman will not have problems with making accessories in the near future, and it would be good if he could create better things. Sorte, standing in the water with a sad voice, washed the dirt off herself and expressed her dissatisfaction with this use of the Scarlet Frontier. She was getting out of the water and said that she wanted to get rid of this debt quickly. Ain pointed out that she was talking like that as if only she herself looked happy. Sorte, while getting dressed, asked to stop talking about it. Ain poured water from the kettle that had just boiled into a mug and thought that it wasn't so bad. And Sorte decided that she trusted him too much. The wolf girl took the mug in her hands and said that she didn't like such guys, then drank the contents of the mug. Ain was surprised and wanted to know if it was true. Sorte began to explain her words. It seemed to her that such people unceremoniously invade a person, causing disorder in feelings. But one could also say that it is not so bad. In other words, you begin to not understand what you are thinking about. Becoming serious, she saw no reason to acknowledge him here, since all men who liked big curves were worthless. Cheering up, she decided to hurry back and increase Itsuki's work. The girls came to the Alchemist Guild and saw Itsuki being held by Reinrich and Wreath. They wondered what was going on. And Itsuki was screaming "No way" and "Let go." Reinrich calmed the girls down. Because nothing special had happened, he was a little tired, so they were going to cheer him up. And Itsuki screamed and thought that it was something dangerous. The skull was definitely there for a reason. The girls surrounded him and held his hands, and Sorte placed her spear against Itsuki's neck. Now it was easy for them to give him the potion. The master opened Itsuki's mouth and began to offer the potion. He resisted, but drops were already falling on his tongue. He kept saying that he wasn't going to drink something dangerous and decided to just pretend to swallow it and spit it out. Reinrich punched Itsuki in the stomach to make sure he swallowed the potion. That's what happened. He swallowed it. His eyes trembled, and he passed out. The boy slowly opened his eyes. A female voice asked if he was awake. Itsuki suddenly realized that there were someone's knees under his head. The girl was giving him water and asked him to drink slowly. Itsuki thought that these were Ain's knees, who at that moment asked if he could stand up. He wanted to lie down a little longer, but the girl began to shake him so that he would get up. Itsuki looked up and realized that the knees belonged to Sorte, who at that moment was telling him to get up quickly. Itsuki jumped up and stuttered, asking why Sorte, to which she replied that she had no choice. He said Aine's name, who responded immediately, and Sorte discontentedly called him a fool. The guy started saying that his body hurt and he was hungry, and Ain saw that the gentleman had woken up and apologized for what had happened recently. The three of them sat at the table, and Itsuki greedily ate the meat and everything on the plate. The girls looked at him a little surprised. Having eaten his fill, he stroked his belly with a smile. After he was given that dangerous medicine to drink, he began making accessories with an amazing impulse, although he did not remember it. Reinrich estimated the accessories, and the total came to 40 million Nora. Itsuki thought about it, because there were 5 days left until the day of the competition, and there were still 36 million Nora left. With materials running low and time running out, he urgently needed to come up with something that would change everything in one fell swoop. He tapped away, and an idea came to him. That day, the man held a piece of crystal rose quartz in his hands, and when he saw the stone emitting vibrations, when magical power was put into it, a revelation descended upon the man. Itsuki Shinomiya was just a simple company employee. His trials began in another world, but it was extremely difficult. He, making a form based on this from the films imprinted in the memory many times in the past, despite the fact that some broke and some, not showing the intended function, stopped working. However, Shinomiya did not give up, spending his whole soul to create this servant of the pleasure of human wisdom in this world. He put the tools on the table and excitedly shouted that he had done it. He held out his hand and held out a pink rotor. That's what he called the thing. The girls didn't understand what it was. He wanted to explain sarcastically what it was, but I can't. He turned back, and Sorte told him to look at them and talk. The girls assumed it was a massage tool. Sorte suggested Ain try it because she recently said that her shoulders hurt. The girl agreed to try it, and asked Itsuki to take care of her. He nodded his head and remembered the mechanism of the device. Ain sat on the chair waiting, and Itsuki began. The girl instantly blushed. Her body went numb from the vibration of the rotor. The massage gave her great pleasure. She realized that this was an amazing and relaxing massage. After finishing the massage, Ain suggested trying it to Sorte, asking if she felt okay, and the wolf girl asked suspiciously if that was how it was used. Itsuki got scared, he doesn't like smart dogs, and went up to the girl and whispered in her ear the method of using it in his world. Sorte blushed and turned away, saying, "Well, that's how it is," and later turned to Aina, saying that they still had to get rid of him immediately. Ain grabbed the girl and asked what happened and what was the matter. She became curious about what was wrong with the instrument. Sorte did not want to talk and asked to let her go, and Itsuki at that moment decided to go out for a while. The girl shouted after him not to run away. He went outside. It was already night. After examining his tool, he was glad that the tool made in a hurry worked well. Itsuki thought that there must be shops like this here too, and he could earn a lot without competition. Looking at the tool again, he remembered Wendy and asked her to wait a bit. He was walking down the street and thinking about how to sell it, but he met some men on his way. They looked at each other. One of the men tripped Itsuki, and he flew into the masonry. As he fell onto the road, he heard laughter and conversations behind him. The man was grimacing and saying he had broken his leg, and the other said he had to pay for it. The man approached the lying Itsuki and said that as an apology he should pay 2 million and he would forgive him. The guy said that was too much and offered a potion. The man lunged at Itsuki and demanded money. The boy threw the man's hand away and asked if Dadaril had sent it. The man was amused and asked the name again and said he didn't know it. At that moment, Itsuki jumped to his feet and ran, under the insults of the men. They shouted at him to stop. The guy decided to distract the robbers and pointed his finger at the sky, saying that a gold coin was falling from the sky. The men didn't believe it at first, but when the coin fell from the sky, they were taken aback. Itsuki was glad he didn't use his pocket money skill today. But the man didn't want to let go and threw a dagger at him. The guy turned around and saw the dagger flying towards him. Suddenly a girl appeared and deflected the blade with her foot, and Itsuki fell again. Turning around, he saw a cat girl who said only one word, "Visit." Itsuki's mouth opened in surprise. The girl who saved him was Shiro. He remembered their first meeting in the city. They were sitting in a diner and discussing things that they often encounter and mostly while eating. He asked the girl to tell him her name. The girl, eating a bun with sausage, said that her name was Shiro. She stood in front of Itsuki lying on the rocks and said that she was the master's weapon and if they stretched out their hands to the master, they would die. The men rudely addressed Shiro and, not having finished their threats, immediately received an answer from her, because even if they cried, she would not let them go. He swung, but Shiro was already behind him, saying that he was too slow. She reached for her sword and was about to strike, when Itsuki tried to stop her. She looked at him and missed. But it only seemed that way. The man had a sword gaping in his stomach. He fell onto the road, and at that time Shiro did a somersault and with a karate scream dealt with the rest. At the same time, she said that she was finished, and Itsuki was surprised by her strength. He thanked her for her help, a little puzzled, and she said that Yaesi said to guard and Shiro would protect the master. Itsuki thought about the answer and asked to be taken to her master. Shiro asked in surprise and pointed at him, saying that he was still the master. The guy was puzzled again and asked to be taken to Yasis. The girl asked again and asked shyly if he was going to buy Shiro. And then, upset, she heard that it wouldn't work now. But despite this, he wanted to count on her, and Itsuki wanted to thank her, and he had a small talk with Yasis. Shiro turned around and said that they could go. She ran, and Itsuki ran after her, asking her to be a little slower, because he couldn't keep up with her. He offered to hold hands, and Shiro asked not to treat her like a child. Itsuki extended his hand and asked her not to say that. The girl looked at the extended hand with embarrassment and put her own. They walked holding hands and Shiro hummed a song. They were already approaching Yasis's house. The man came out and asked what had happened so late at night, and Itsuki wanted to thank him for the incident with Shiro. Yasis looked at Itsuki seriously, noticing that she had become completely attached to him. Shiro was lying with her head on Itsuki's knee, and he in turn noticed that she was very friendly and grateful. He wanted to show one thing. He took out the rotor and showed it to Yasis, who didn't understand what he wanted to do with it. Itsuki said that he would like to trade them if possible. The man thought he wanted to buy the machines and asked for how much. Itsuki showed 4 fingers and named the price, 40 million. Yasis grinned and said that at best about 100,000 and thought that they were overselling again. Itsuki was confident and wanted to make a presentation. The guy put the device on the table and said that he didn't want to buy it. Yasis didn't understand what he meant. Itsuki continued enthusiastically and said that he wanted to buy out the rights to it. They looked at each other puzzled. Yasis continued, in other words, he is selling the rights to sell this pink rotor as a massage product in stores like that, Itsuki confirmed. Yasis was interested in the product. He thought it was attractive. Besides, he had influence in this kind of shops. Itsuki was already happy and wanted to continue, but the man stopped him. He asked to tell the specific contents of the contract. Itsuki began to explain that he wanted Yasis to buy exclusive rights to the rotor for 40 million he makes and sells wholesale. The selling price is at the man's discretion, but if the goods are sold, Itsuki asks for 50,000 per piece. After his proposed contract, he waited for a response from Yasis. The man did not want to accept the offer because there are no guarantees for reimbursement of costs. He cannot pay 40 million for empty rights. He also said that there might be a demand for this product, but there was no reason that Itsuki would be able to continue to supply the product. Itsuki immediately began to say that he would be able to make regular deliveries, and Aine and Sorte would collect the materials for him. Yasis agreed. If the girls collected the materials, then there would definitely be no problems. But there was one but. The guy just came to the city as a vagabond, without his own home, and no one knows when he will leave the city. Itsuki agreed with the words, because the offer from a guy you barely know clearly does not inspire confidence. Yasis agreed. And in that case, Itsuki continued, he gives his body as a pledge, that is, he will become a servant. The man was surprised, and Shiro too. Yasis did not understand why he had to go so far, because such a thing should not be said, since he himself knew the answer. The man laughed and thought Itsuki was an interesting person. The guy, in turn, wanted to sign a contract, but Yasis said that this would not be necessary. After all, he wanted to get permanent rights to the, quote, pink rotor. There is no point in saying that it is only for the duration of the contract. Itsuki was already in a hurry to get the money and end the conversation, but Yasis continued. He said that there was no mercy for betrayal. The man asked if the conditions were acceptable to him. Itsuki agreed, frightened. Yasis already wanted to agree on 40 million, but Itsuki was worried about another question regarding Shiro. Coming out of Yasis's mansion, the sun was already rising in the sky. Itsuki also noticed this. Since then he had made only 10 devices. He was very tired. Shiro turned to the guy. She was falling asleep on the go. Itsuki stroked her head, said that she would sleep in the guild. He lifted her onto his shoulders, and Shiro apologized. Because they asked her to guard, she would protect the owner. To which Itsuki agreed. Dadaril shouted at the men, breaking a plate in the process. They couldn't handle some stranger. He told them to go again and work off some of the money they had paid. The men apologized. The butler said, showing respect to the gentleman, that any demonstrative intervention would benefit the other side, and that if such a thing caused Yasis's displeasure, there could be consequences in the future. Dadaril agreed and declared that he would not lose even without tricks. Itsuki would not get away with just a tear-stained face. He would regret to death that he had extended his hands to his Wendy. He imagined her taking a bath and calling him Lord. The next day, voices were heard in the Alchemists' Guild. Itsuki was asking what he wanted there. And Dadaril, without waiting for the day of the competition, thought that he would courageously admit defeat. Dadaril pointed his finger at Itsuki and yelled at him for daring to call a man that. Dadaril asked Itsuki who he thought he was. Then Dadaril smirked and said that he understood everything. Apparently, Itsuki realized the great difference in influence and finally admitted defeat. However, Itsuki smirked and told Dadarila with a wide smile, calling him names again, that he would make him cry bitterly. Dadarila thought Itsuki was insulted. The girls watched their quarrel attentively. Dadaril shouted that he would never forgive the boy and would show him real hell. Itsuki laughed at the man and asked him to demonstrate his words. Their quarrel was interrupted by Yasis, who said that it was earlier than the appointed day, but the result had been decided. He announced the summing up of the results. In one moment, a huge number of heavy sacks were laid out and piled into a huge mountain. Dadaril took a handful of coins with a shaking hand and said that he couldn't believe it. Itsuki stood behind the man and said that he had earned exactly 80 million. Itsuki points his finger at himself and says that victory is his. Yasis turns to Dadaril and says that this is what it means. As a man sees the client has reached the appointed amount earlier. On this note, the competition ended and became formal. Dadaril started waving his hand and saying that the man was probably joking, and he simply wouldn't admit it. The man then points to the side and turns to Litrick and says that he is sure that she gave the money. The woman said that Dadaril was very noisy, and then, putting the phone away, threw the package to the man. She asked him to look at it. The man caught the package and asked what it was. Then he unwrapped it and was very surprised, not believing his eyes. These were payment details for accessories, and the buyer was Litrick. The man was shaking and could not believe his eyes. The woman blew out smoke and said that it was written there. All the accessories made by Itsuki were bought by this guild for 40 million. Dadaril couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was very surprised that the accessories were bought for 40 million. He doesn't believe that such a price can exist. The woman said that she was not mistaken in her assessment. Itsuki's alchemy should not be underestimated. At that moment, she was looking at the beautiful accessory. Itsuki burst into tears and called Litrick. At this point, Dadaril was furious and asked where the boy got the remaining 40 million. He said that they were simply trying to deceive him. Yasa snapped his finger and said that Itsuki had received the remaining 40 million from him. He signaled to the servant. The man came up with a tray in his hands and asked Dadaril to look at what he had brought. Dadaril asked what it meant. Then he looked at the tray the young man had brought, and surprised, said it was the king's seal. Yasis said it was called the Pink Rotor. The customer had designed the product. Yasis had bought the exclusive rights to it for 40 million. Dadaril stuttered and said that if the king had approved such a thing, it should bring in a huge profit if he sold it himself. Itsuki said that he sold it to Yasis for only 40 million. Itsuki thought about the king's seal, and that Yasis works fast. Itsuki then smirked and said that it was a competition he could not possibly lose. Dadaril started shouting and saying that he would never accept Itsuki's victory. At that moment, Wendy interrupted the man. The girl turned to him and said that the result was determined, so he had to accept it. Dadaril shouted at the girl that she was making fun of him, and that she would go with him because she belonged to him as his thing in truth. The girl replied that she refused to go with him because her body and heart belonged to Lord Itsuki, so she would not go with him. Suddenly a hammer hit the wall. Itsuki was scared and even screamed a little. He turned his attention to Dadaril, who was laughing at that moment. He muttered under his breath that they were all making fun of him. He turned to his subordinates who had broken down the wall, and then pointed his finger at the opponents and told his subordinates to kill them all. Litrick said she was irritated by all of this. Dadaril had improved the ventilation for the people without permission. It was very rude, so she hoped he was prepared for the consequences. At that moment, the night girls drew their swords and told Litrick to step back. At that moment, Wendy cringed. Itsuki approached the girl and told her not to worry, because they would protect her. He called Aina, identified himself, and addressed the Beastman girl as a dog. She rebelled and asked who the dog was. Suddenly, a girl jumped down in front of Itsuki and Wendy. She said that they now had another cat with them. Itsuki was happy to see Shiro. The three girls went on the attack. They were led by Aina. They rushed straight at the crowd of men who were also ready for battle. One of the men struck with his hammer, but Aina deftly blocked the blow with her sword. The other men were attacked by the beast girls. Itsuki was hugging Wendy. Then he asked the girl if she was scared. Even though he said that they would protect her, he was scared too. Itsuki laughed a little. He watches the girls fight and says that he is weak and has neither the strength nor the skills to fight. He does not want to fight and be rude. He thinks that he is an unreliable man, but he does not want to let go of this hand. He says, holding Wendy's hand, that he wants to be with her. The girl, having listened to the young man, began to cry tenderly. At this point, Dadaril was shouting about what the problem was with the woman and children. He was ordering his wards to kill them immediately. Suddenly, someone's voice was heard ordering them to stop what was happening. Everyone looked carefully towards the hole in the wall. The man walked into the room and asked Dadaril what she was doing. It was a bit unworthy of an adult to drag the Scarlet Frontier into a simple fight. He asked Letrick if she was telling the truth. Letrick said it was her words, because the man's stupid son started it. She asks the Western District's general manager, Darwin, how he is going to handle this. Itsuki looked at the man and thought that there was this man standing at the top of this area, and then he noticed a girl next to him. She smiled sweetly at him and nodded. Darwin says that the first thing to do is to find out about the situation. He turns to Dadaril, and the man immediately flinches. Dadaril began to tremble with fear and asked his father to listen. Suddenly, Darwin approached Dadaril and said that he always told him to call him affectionately Dad. The man then thinks and tries to understand what he told his son to call him. Itsuki looked at Darwin carefully and tried to understand who he was. Darwin smirked and said he didn't care. Itsuki thought he didn't really understand, but he felt a terrible danger that was different from Letrick and Yasis. Eventually, Darwin was told everything. The man said he was betting that the contest was for that woman. He points to Wendy. Dadaril confirms his father's guess and says that Itsuki used very dirty tricks. Darwin becomes very serious. He turns to Dadaril and says that once he has entered the competition, he must use any tricks, because winning is winning and losing is losing. He asks Dadaril if that is how he taught him. Darwin then turns to Itsuki and says that he is the handsome man who defeated his son. He tries to approach the boy, but a blade is placed to his neck. Shiro tells the man to stop, and if he approaches her master, he will die on the spot. Darwin said sarcastically that he was very afraid. Then he turned to Itsuki and said that the young man had quite a good figure. He was a real handsome man. Darwin asked Itsuki to tell his ward to remove the dangerous object from his neck, otherwise they would not be able to talk calmly. Itsuki turned to Shiro. The girl told Darwin that if he made any strange movements, he would die instantly. Darwin agreed, and then looked at Itsuki and told him that they could talk now. After a while, they all come into the room and sit down on the couches. Darwin puts his shoes on the table, and Itsuki looks at him tensely. Jasis and Letrick also came into the room. A maid came up to Letrick and asked the woman if everyone needed tea. Letrick replied that Darwin would be fine. Then Darwin said that he understood the gist of the story. That is, completely defeated, Dadaril went into a rage, and as a result of all this picture was obtained. Dadaril turned to his father and asked him to listen. He asked if his father really believed the words of those people. Darwin asked Dadaril to stop talking about it, and said that he could not justify himself, given the circumstances. Dadaril shouted that he was Darwin's son. Darwin said that they were not blood relatives, or better to say that if he was his son, he should not disgrace his parents and just die. Dadaril was very scared by the man's threatening look. Darwin said that, besides, he always said that if you want to win, you must die, and if you lose, you must accept it courageously. He turns to the girl standing behind him and asks Mira if he is right. The girl winks and tells the man, calling him father, that this is exactly what she heard. Darwin said that Dadaril had made two mistakes. First, he had found fault with Yasis's decision. Second, he had caused a quarrel with the Alchemists Guild. The immunity policy towards the Slave Trade Company and the Alchemist Guild is absolute. However, now that Dadaril has broken that rule, they must take some responsibility. He thinks about what they should do. He asks Itsuki about this, who is sweating and thinking that Yasis and Letrick should not leave him. He looked at Jasis and Letrick. Jasis said that he wanted compensation for the mental suffering caused by the violent scene, and, if possible, he wanted compensation for the interruption of work during the recovery of soul and body. Daryl asked Yasis how many tens of thousands of holes that would be. Yasis grinned and said he would discuss it later with his wife and send the bill to Darwin. Itsuki thought that mental suffering was something like that, which could not frighten the man. Then he thought about the fact that Yasis had a wife. Darwin put his hand on his head and said it was all pain. Then he turned to Letrick and asked the woman what was wrong with her. Letrick said she would start with the cost of repairing the destroyed wall, and as payment for the apology, she wanted the man's bank and one of his exclusive privileges. Darwin was very surprised, and then he sighed and said that he knew the woman would ask for that. He said that the bank was harsh, so he asked the woman to have pity on him. Letrick replied that a man could not even give her a say in financial decisions. Then she would be satisfied with a two-person system, but if he did not like it, she could file a petition for his son's secret trade. Itsuki is surprised and thinks to himself what this secret trade means. Mira explains that it is the secret trade of illegal substances through the pharmaceutical guild. She asks if the woman is really talking about that. Itsuki is very surprised and asks if he really heard correctly about illegal goods. Darwin exhaled and said that a person who does not distinguish correctness has a vulgar way of earning money. He turned to Dadaril and said that even without today's mistake, he wanted to punish him soon. He started a willful business and ended up adding unnecessary trouble. Dadaril was shaking all over. Darwin asked him if he really thought Darwin wouldn't notice this. For him, the punishment of the church would be enough to run away barefoot. Then he tells his charges to take Dadaril to the mansion. They replied that they understood the man's order. Then he says that if Dadaril runs away or kills himself, then they all understand. Itsuki thought that this guy is a real man. Darwin then turned to Itsuki and asked him what he should do for him. Itsuki replied that he had already received enough, so it was okay. Itsuki at this point thought that he just wanted to run away from here. Shiro, who was standing behind Darwin, told him not to scare his master so much. Darwin said that the girl also drilled his back furiously all the time, and it was completely uncomfortable. Darwin said that Itsuki really got a good servant, and he would like to have one like that for himself. He then points to Wendy and says that besides, she is also a beautiful woman. He asks the girls and says, why don't the two of them go with him, since he won't do anything bad? Suddenly, Itsuki jumped up from his seat and covered Wendy with his hand. Itsuki says that it seems that his crush on girls isn't as bad as his son's, but he doesn't approve of the way he approaches things, and besides, Wendy is already his girlfriend. Darwin said that Itsuki was shaking with fear a while ago, but now he was a completely different person, ready to bite. He praised Itsuki. He said that most guys like that don't live long. Itsuki said that he came here to do something interesting and fun, and until then, even if he gets killed, he won't die. Darwin said that the boy was a vagabond, and that was very interesting. Itsuki replied that, first of all, if we were to talk about an apology, he refused. Dadaril would get a punishment, and that was all he needed. Litrick turned to Itsuki and said that it was no longer a question of accepting or not. She did not know how it was in the place he came from, but this place also had its own manners. An apology won't work unless you accept the person's apology, so as not to leave lumps in each other's eyes. Darwin added that this is why, if he can do anything, he should just say it. Then he puts his hand on his daughter and asks, how about marrying Mayura? She is a very good woman. Itsuki is very surprised. Mira smiles and says that Itsuki is an interesting and generous person, although she doesn't know if he will be satisfied with her. Itsuki responded, apologetically, that he thought someone like him was not suitable for a man's daughter. They had no relationship this time, so he declined. Mira said that it was a pity. Litrick told Itsuki not to think about it so seriously and just say what he wants right now. Itsuki thought about what he wants right now and said that if it really is anything, then he wants to ask for one thing. After some time, the young man drinks the tea that Rit brewed. The girl replied that she received good tea, which was also very tasty. Itsuki prefers coffee, so he doesn't really understand this delicious thing, but he likes it very much. Litrick said that Itsuki is so carefree. After all the troubles he had been through, the boy really didn't feel any worries. Itsuki agreed. In the end, everything calmed down, and Litrick also received various bonuses, so everyone is happy. The woman was surprised and said that they had created a quarrel with her, and as a sign of settling the quarrel, it was a little modest. Itsuki repeated the woman's words that it was modest. Litrick added and said that the bank was also for two, so for her it was modest. Itsuki sighed and thought about what Litrick was really going to do. Their conversation was interrupted by Aina. The girl said that Darwin's messenger had just arrived. Today he wanted to convey to him what was discussed. Itsuki stands up and tells Litrick that he will then leave for a short time. Litrick began drinking tea and told Itsuki to come when he was settled, as she had a job for him. The young man waved and said that he understood. After some time, the girls told the boy that he was lucky. Itsuki asked what they were hinting at. The girl said that she still thought that such a thing should be bought with his own hard-earned money. Itsuki asks if she means he is a hard-working man. The girl says she thinks he did his best this time. Itsuki thanks her. Aina interrupts and says that the gentleman is looking forward to it. Itsuki agrees and says that according to the map it is somewhere around here. Aina then points to the right place and asks if it could be this. Thus Itsuki arrived in another world and acquired his own home. Itsuki and the girls stood right in front of the doors of the huge mansion. They were all very surprised, but Aina called this mansion her sweet home. The girl was overjoyed. Itsuki and the girl turn to Aina and ask what it means to hear her say sweet home. They start whispering. Itsuki says that Aina just called this house sweet. The girl replied that maybe she was comparing him to the past. Then Itsuki grabbed the door handles, but did not open the door. The girl asked the boy why he didn't want to go in, to which Itsuki turned around, smiled awkwardly, and said that he was a little nervous. Itsuki thought about his home. He was happy when he first got a job and rented a room with his own money, but he didn't expect to get a home exclusively for himself. He doesn't quite understand the real feeling. Then Itsuki opens the door of the house and sees Wendy inside the room, who bowed as a greeting to Itsuki. The girl greeted Itsuki, who was very surprised. He asked Wendy why she was there. Wendy smiled and said that her duty was to prepare everything before the master arrived. Itsuki remembered Wendy's words and thought that now he had reached the peak and now he could die in peace. His thoughts were interrupted by Darwin, who greeted the young man. The man asked Itsuki if he was satisfied with the house. Itsuki asked the man if he was sure the young man could get the job. Darwin replied that there was nothing to talk about now. He did not do things halfway, so he picked up the house entirely at the request of the young man. There is an alchemy room in the basement. He also arranged suitable furniture and, of course, everything is first class. This place is a real find, and it is a bit of a pity for him to part with it, but he asked the young man to accept this place. Itsuki thanked Darwin, and they both shook hands. Darwin added that they had now closed the case of his stupid son. Itsuki could do whatever he wanted from now on, and tomorrow Yasus would come here. Darwin leaves and Itsuki wonders what to do now. Wendy asks if maybe she should make some tea. Itsuki agrees with the girl. He then turns to Aina and Sorte and tells the girls to use the appropriate rooms. He then tells Sorte that he charges for the accommodation with service. Sorte is indignant, but the young man says that then she stays outside. After a while, Sorte was lounging in a soft bed. She was tossing and turning and saying that it was better than the nearest hotel. Aina agreed with the girl's words. Sorte squeezed the pillow and said that Itsuki did a good job. Then she remembered about the bath and asked if there was a bath. Aina agreed and said that the master would take her immediately. Sorte replied that they hadn't had a proper bath for a long time, so she took Aina's hand and told her to go there together. Aina replied that the gentleman was taking a bath now, but Sorte didn't listen to her. At this time, Itsuki is sitting in the bathtub. He stretches and says that this is a real paradise because he hasn't taken a bath for a long time where he can stretch his arms and legs. Come to think of it, he was a frequent visitor to the spa, the only oasis in the black life where overtime was normal. Now all he needed was a cold drink and some cold tofu to be in a good mood. He pours water over himself and thinks about whether it is possible to make a refrigerator with alchemy. He feels that he can get more money than for the pink rotor. Suddenly, someone approached him. Itsuki turned around and saw Wendy, who asked the boy if she could rub his back. Itsuki was scared and immediately started covering himself. The boy asked Wendy what she was doing there. Wendy replied that she came to rub the boy's back. After a while, Itsuki sat there all embarrassed. Wendy asked him to tell her next time when he was going to take a bath so that she could serve him any time. The girl pours soap onto a sponge and begins to rub Itsuki's back. At one point, she asks the boy if she is hurting him. Itsuki replies that he is fine. At this time, Itsuki was completely focused on his body. Wendy snuggled up to Itsuki and thanked him for making her his and for allowing her to be with a boy. The girl says that she is very happy. At this point, they are interrupted by Sorte, who asks Itsuki how long he will take to bathe, since it is their time now. Aina asks Sorte not to be so rude. At that moment, they saw a picture of Itsuki and Wendy close to each other. Sorte, with a shaking hand, began to tell Itsuki that he was just a scoundrel. Itsuki told Sorte that it was just a misunderstanding. At that time, the girl took a basin and began to cover Aina's face so that she would not look at it, otherwise she would defile her eyes. Aina silently turned around and walked out of the bath. Sorte started to mock and said that Aina hated Itsuki, although he deserved it. Itsuki started to say that nothing happened, and Wendy was just washing his body. At that moment, Aina entered the bathroom wearing only a towel. The girl apologized to the master and said that if the master was taking a bath, then the servant's duty was to help with this, so she wanted to help too. Aina apologized to Wendy for dumping all the work on her without thinking twice. Sorte asked Aina not to worry about unnecessary things, and she told Itsuki to get out of the bathroom. Aina wanted to get closer to Sorte and said that she wanted to do her duties, but suddenly, the girl slips on the remains of soap and falls to the floor. The towel flies off her body. Aina was embarrassed and immediately began to close it, and Sorte at that moment hit Itsuki and shouted at him not to look. Itsuki thought about his wonderful rest in the bath, which was ruined. At that moment, voices were heard in the corridors of Darwin's house. Someone was regretting the incident with Dadero, but that was, in fact, something they had to deal with, even if it meant disturbing their dear father. Mara said that Dharma didn't need to worry about it, because Dadero had ruined their reputation. Anyway, the foster father took up the matter personally. Dharma agreed with the girl's words. He said that, however, Dadariel was truly a foolish man, since he had forgotten his father's kindness. Mira asked how long they would continue to talk about the one with whom it was finished, since this conversation was no longer interesting. Dharma apologized to Mira and said that if we talk about interesting things, then the current key figure is more interesting. Mira replied that he was a very funny man. Dharma replied that he also wanted to meet this young master of the Alchemist Guild. The next morning, Shiro stood on the roof of the mansion and carefully watched the birds that had arrived. Then she came into the house and started wagging her tail. The girl started sniffing and smelled a familiar scent. She walked up to the door and opened it slightly. The girl saw a room with a large bed on which Itsuki was sleeping. The girl called the owner. Itsuki said in his sleep that he would redo the document by the end of the week, so he apologizes and says not to joke with him about this file. Itsuki was shaking and talking in his sleep about the boss getting dandruff from time to time. Shiro stroked Itsuki's head, and he stopped shaking. A few hours later, when the sun was shining brightly in the sky, Itsuki opened his eyes and woke up, because it was already morning. Then he saw something moving next to him and, looking down, realized it was Shiro. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Itsuki allowed him to enter the room. Wendy entered the room and said good morning to Itsuki, then said that breakfast was ready. She then leaned over the bed and said that Shiro had come in the night. Itsuki agreed and said that he woke up and Shiro was already sleeping next to him. Wendy smiled and said that there was nothing to be done about this child. She says that he'll wake her up now, but Itsuki says that she can sleep a little longer. Then Shiro's stomach growls. After a while, the table was set. Itsuki wished all the girls a bon appetit. Wendy told Aina and Sorte that he would now pour them some soup too. The girls thanked Wendy. Sorte asked Wendy if she really had cooked all those dishes. Wendy agreed and asked what was wrong. Sorte frowned and felt a strange sense of defeat, since the housework was supposed to be hers. Itsuki and Shiro started to eat a huge amount of food at once. Sorte told Wendy that she had made a delicious meal. Then Itsuki and Shiro couldn't swallow the pieces of their food. They started to grab their glasses of drinks and then started to gobble up the huge amount of food again. After a while, Itsuki thanked her for the food. Wendy put a cup of tea down. Itsuki thanked her and said it was delicious. Wendy replied that if the boy said so, it was worth making. Itsuki also said that yesterday's dinner was also amazing, and whether he could eat such delicious food every day from now on. Sorte smirked and said that the boy had definitely been fed. Now it was unclear who was in charge. Itsuki smirked and said that Sorte seemed to not understand anything. Sorte asked the boy what he was talking about. Itsuki replied that it was no exaggeration to say that a person's happiness was determined by the quality of food. He asked if the girl knew the taste of anpan, eaten to fill one's belly. A dinner that fills not only an empty stomach, but also the heart. It is what gives energy and hope for tomorrow. She is the true ruler of the house, and for them, this warm and delicious food is provided by Wendy, the goddess. Shiro then turned to Wendy, who was washing the dishes, and said that she had brought the plates. Wendy thanked the girl. Shiro stared at Wendy, who noticed Shiro's gaze. Shiro said that Wendy had changed a little. The food tasted better than when she had it at Yasu's. Wendy was surprised, then smiled and asked if that was really true. After a while, Itsuki asked all the girls to gather together for a minute. Sorte asked if something serious had happened. Itsuki replied that it was a little worrying. He wants to reward the girls and thank them somehow, so he gives them boxes with jewelry and asks the girls to take them. He gave Aina beautiful earrings, Sorte and Wendy beautiful brooches for their clothes, and Shiro he gave bell-shaped hairpins. Itsuki said that although they were homemade, this was how he expressed his gratitude. Then Itsuki starts fidgeting. Sorte asks the boy why he is so nervous. Itsuki says that it is very embarrassing to give gifts facing each other, so he feels awkward. Aina was embarrassed and thanked the gentleman. Wendy said that she would treasure this gift. Shiro jingled her bells sweetly, and Sorte also awkwardly thanked the young man. After a while, Itsuki asked Sorte and Aina if they were really leaving already, since they could rest a little longer. Sorte replied that they couldn't do that. With the next task, they would pay off their meaningless debt. Then they will be free. The girl says that from a domesticated dog, she will return to a free wolf. Suddenly, Itsuki asked the girl for her paw, and she immediately gave it to him. Sorte realized her mistake and immediately began to cry at Itsuki. The young man turned to Aina and told her not to be reckless and to take care of themselves. Aina said that she understood. Itsuki wished the girls a safe journey. Sorte told Aina that they would end it this time. Aina replied that it seemed the girl was right. Sorte replied that it was no time to laugh. They had to do something before Renki returned. If she found out that they had become servants to a man, they did not know what she would do. Aina said that Sorte is worried about the master. Sorte denies this and says that in any case we must move forward cheerfully. That afternoon, in the presence of Yasis, a contract ceremony was held with Wendy and Shiro. Contract seals appeared on the girls' hands. Yasis told Itsuki that he didn't think I would be pushing a servant to a contract, like a woman pushing her husband to marry. He still had a lot to learn as a merchant. Itsuki apologized for the man having to come specially. Yasis thanked Itsuki for buying Wendy and Shiro. Itsuki apologized for Shiro, as he forced him to buy. Yasis says that he is sure that the boy will need this girl. Itsuki agrees and says that it is so. If anything else happens, he asks the man to let him know. After a while, Itsuki was sitting on the grass enjoying the fresh air. Wendy came up to him and said that it was almost time for dinner. The girl then asked the boy what he was doing here. Itsuki replied that the garden here was spacious, so he was thinking of making a field here. Wendy asks what the field means. Itsuki agrees and says that when he came here, he had such a thought. Wendy asks the young man if he has worked in the field before. Itsuki says no and says he wanted to try. He will grow vegetables, and Wendy can grow flowers and decorate the house with them. Shiro will hunt in the mountains. They can also all go fishing together. And then they invite Aina and Sorte to visit. Shiro wakes up and asks the owner what he is talking about. Itsuki says that the three of them should live happily. Shiro hugs Itsuki and says that she is happy with the owner. Itsuki agrees and says that Shiro is very cute. Itsuki thinks that being happy in this place is what he wants right now. After some time, Wendy comes to the young man and says that guests have arrived. Itsuki is very surprised that guests have arrived. Dharma and Mira came to him. The young man greets him and says that he is one of Darwin's children, and his name is Dharma. It is a great honor for him to meet the young master. Itsuki was surprised when Dharma called him young master. Dharma continued to smile, and Itsuki thought about why this handsome guy was smiling like that. It was a little annoying. After a while, Wendy brings a tray with cups of tea. Dharma thanks the girl. He says that he will introduce himself again. He is one of Darwin's adopted sons, and his name is Dharma. From now on, he is glad to meet the young man. He is in charge of construction and design work under his adoptive father. Itsuki wanted to introduce himself, but Dharma said that he is Latrik's apprentice. He heard that the young master sells well. Itsuki thought that Dharma reminded him of a pushy, frivolous sales guy. Itsuki asked the man what business he was on. Dharma apologized to Itsuki and said that he got a little carried away. Today, he came to express his gratitude and apology to the young master. Itsuki asked what gratitude and apology Dharma was talking about. Dharma agreed and said that he was referring to the incident with Dadaro. The man had caused the boy a lot of trouble, and he sincerely apologized for it. Itsuki asked what happened to Dadaro, although he was not particularly bothered by it. Dharma asks if Itsuki wants to hear. Itsuki apologizes and says he doesn't need it after all. Dharma says it's a good choice. Itsuki thought about how both were adopted sons, and there was such a difference between them. He wondered what criteria that uncle used to choose. Dharma said that they didn't need to worry about this person at all. Rather, they got rid of him without consequences, so he wanted to thank the young master. Itsuki said that he had already made a deal with Darwin, so he didn't need to thank him. Itsuki thought about what they got rid of there. Dharma said that this would not do. He wanted to thank the young master from the bottom of his heart. Itsuki asked if it would be better to stop calling him young master. Meira told Itsuki to be careful, because Dharma doesn't like girls very much. Itsuki made a stony, manly face. Dharma told Meira not to do that, because it's not that he likes men, it's that he likes people who are better than him. Besides, his father comes first. The young master is currently third in line, so he asks Itsuki not to worry. Itsuki mentally asked Dharma to stop. Meira interrupted them and told Dharma that father said that the young master was for her, so he shouldn't be so casual. Dharma apologized to the girl. Itsuki thought that Dharma had such an annoying level of a handsome guy. He doesn't like girls, so it's just a waste of that face. Dharma said he doesn't like to force against his will, but someday Itsuki will understand. Then he can come to his house. Itsuki said he'll never come. After a while, they went out into the courtyard. Dharma asked Itsuki how he liked the house and if he had any complaints. Itsuki said that everything was fine, so he had nothing to complain about, and Dharma should not worry. Dharma smiled and told Itsuki that he was being very careful. Meira added and asked Itsuki how he found the ease of using the bathroom. Itsuki said that this bathroom was very nice. Meira said that she designed this bathroom. Itsuki asked if that was true. Meira agreed and said that while working, she sometimes listened to the preferences of other tramps. For the satisfaction of the young master, she did her best. Itsuki said that the Japanese are very particular about their baths, so he said that this was simply brilliant work. Meira replied that this was very pleasing. Meira asks the boy to tell her when he goes out into the city. She will take him to a place where other vagabonds liked. Itsuki thought that this girl seemed to be from a good family. But why was she adopted by Darwin? Dharma says that he apologizes now, but it's time for them to go. If they need anything, he can feel free to ask. Itsuki thanks Dharma and Meira. Itsuki then said that the guests were very tiring. At that moment, Shiro's stomach growled. Itsuki apologized to the girl and said that she was hungry. Shiro also said that she was hungry. Itsuki took Shiro's hand and said that he was wondering what was for dinner tonight. Shiro said that Wendy seemed to be grilling a large meat. After some time, Itsuki, Shiro, and Wendy were sitting at the table enjoying dinner. After dinner, Itsuki sat in a chair and said that he ate too much and could not fit in it anymore. Wendy interrupted Itsuki's thoughts and said that she had prepared a bath and if the boy wanted to take it. Itsuki thanked Wendy. The girl said that she would also come later. Shiro raised her hands and said that she would also take a bath with the master. After a while, they come to the bathroom. Itsuki starts to soap Shiro's hair. Itsuki joked and called Shiro a visitor, and then asked if she itches behind her ear. Then he rinsed the shampoo out of the girl's hair. Shiro began to shake herself off. Itsuki asked her to stop, and then go and warm herself in the hot water. Shiro started running to the bath. Itsuki said that if she ran, she would fall. Then Shiro jumped straight into the water. Itsuki thought that even though she was a cat, she could swim without any problems. Itsuki then asked Shiro not to swim in the bath, but the girl did not pay attention to him because she was busy with something else. Then he asked if Shiro was feeling well. The girl replied that she enjoyed taking a bath. At this time, Wendy was taking off her clothes to take a bath, too. Itsuki had already climbed into the water and was enjoying the beautiful water with Shiro. He said that Shiro should sit properly up to her shoulders and warm up. Then Wendy enters the bathroom. The girl washes herself. Then she approaches Itsuki, who doesn't even look at the girl. She apologizes for disturbing him. Wendy sits down in the bathtub. Shiro suddenly felt hot and said that she was leaving the bathtub. Wendy and Itsuki were left alone. Wendy breaks the silence and apologizes to Itsuki. then asks if she can come to the boys' room today. Itsuki agrees. After some time, the young man was lying in his bed when suddenly someone knocked on his door. Itsuki allows the newcomer to enter. Wendy enters the room in her nightgown and apologizes to Itsuki for disturbing him. After a while, Itsuki was sitting on the bed next to Wendy and telling her that after he got his salary, he always went to that restaurant. Their cutlet and rice, as well as the meat dishes, were simply delicious. He wanted Wendy to try them too. The girl said that if the gentleman told her the recipe, she might be able to make something similar, although it probably wouldn't taste the same. Itsuki says that's probably true, but he'll still try her making this dish next time. Then there was a pause. Itsuki thought that for some reason he remembered his first date, where there were also long pauses between him and the girl. Wendy then takes the young man by the hand and tells him that he does not need to be so polite, because she is only his servant. Itsuki interrupts the girl and says that he really likes Wendy, and then Itsuki asks Wendy if she likes him. Wendy agrees, then clasps her hands and says that she likes the gentleman very much. Itsuki is unlike any man she has ever met. It doesn't matter that she is a servant and there is a contract. As long as she is with this man, she asks the young man to make her his woman. Wendy lay down on the bed and Itsuki looked down at her. Then they moved closer to each other and their faces turned very red. Suddenly, the door opened and Shiro entered the room. The girl had entered the wrong door, and it was not the toilet. Shiro approached Wendy and Itsuki and asked what they were doing. Itsuki tried to get out of it and said that Wendy wasn't feeling well, so he was looking after her. Shiro asked if that was true and if Wendy was okay. Itsuki said that Wendy was completely fine now, and then said that he would take the girl to the toilet. Wendy was left alone in the room. The next morning, Itsuki was looking at the sun and thinking about how he couldn't sleep after all. Shiro came up to him and said that Wendy said breakfast was ready. After some time, the young man had breakfast. Wendy asked him if he wanted more soup. Itsuki agreed and asked for more soup. He and Wendy were very embarrassed. Itsuki said that he would go to Litrick for a short time today. Wendy agreed with the young man. After a while, the young man got ready and told the girl that he was going. Wendy told the young man to be careful. Itsuki turned around and walked away, then took the girl by the shoulders and said that next time he would do everything right. Wendy was very embarrassed. Itsuki left the house and waved goodbye to the girl. Wendy smiled and wished the boy a safe journey. Itsuki ran off to do his business, with an awkward smile on his face. After some time, Itsuki comes to the Alchemist's Guild. Litrick examines the potion and says that it is not bad and its quality has increased. Now the young man can try to make a higher level potion. Itsuki agreed. Litrick smirked and said that the boy's answer was very weak, and then asked if he was really tired of being surrounded by cute slaves. Itsuki laughed awkwardly. He then told the woman everything and ended with Shiro coming in and everything ending in nothing. Litrick asked if the boy had returned to his room. Itsuki replied that he was very confused. Litrick said that the boy was simply the worst, and that was usually the reason for divorce. She called Itsuki a stupid boy and added that he left a woman on the bed who was ready for this, because he was a man after all. She then calls Itsuki to follow her, and then asks if the boy is busy. She says that she will now give a lecture, and then pours something into a glass. The woman asks to drink this first. Itsuki was surprised that he would drink something now. Litrick said that if he could tell about it sober, she would serve tea. The young man answered that everything was fine. He then said that Wendy had told him that she liked him, but at that moment he thought for a moment that it was her true feelings, or just a slave's response. Litrick said that the young man had dared to go against the Adventurers Guild in Darwin. However, he was worried about small things now. The boy replied that if he hugged her with such feelings, he would probably hurt her. That was why he couldn't return to the room when he left with Shiro. He simply ran away. Litrick said that Itsuki is a pathetic man. He should not look only at himself, but also at his partner. The woman is a master of lies, but at important moments, contrary to expectations, she cannot hide her true feelings. Itsuki asked if this was a story from life. He could not imagine it so easily. Litrick noted that Itsuki was a rude person. Itsuki smiles and then says that today he asks the woman to keep him company until the end. Litrick said that she will not care for the boy if he passes out. After some time, the young man fell asleep on the table. Litrick called Rit and told her to leave everything as it was, and go to bed too." The girl agreed. Then Lytric covered the boy with a blanket and said that he was indeed a troublesome fellow. She lit her pipe and said that she believed the girl was also to blame for such a moment. The next morning, Itsuki came home. Wendy looked at the boy nervously. Suddenly, Itsuki falls to his knees and wishes Wendy good morning, and also says that he is home. Wendy greets the boy at home with a nervous smile. After a while, Wendy handed Itsuki a cup of tea and said that she had made it a little stronger and hoped that the boy would come to his senses. Itsuki thanked the girl. Shiro asked Itsuki what he did, since Wendy looked so angry. Itsuki thought that even though he said something like that but returned home in the morning, it was just a grudge. Shiro then asked if the boy was working today. Itsuki agreed and then said that there was still time before the next potion delivery, so he wasn't too busy today. Shiro asked if the boy could play with her today. Itsuki then says that he has a small request for Shiro, and then looks at Wendy and says that he will probably help Wendy today after all. The girl with an indifferent look told the boy not to worry, because she could handle it herself. Itsuki realized that it didn't work, and Wendy's eyes didn't look very happy. Wendy pouted and started to leave the room. Itsuki tried to talk to her, but she didn't pay attention to him. Itsuki grabbed his head with his hands, and Shiro started to calm him down. Wendy walked down the hallway, then sighed and said with tears welling up in her eyes that she had been waiting for the master. After some time, Itsuki was lying on the grass under the sun's rays, and thinking that he had really hurt Wendy, so he didn't understand what to do. In the past, the same thing happened. At that time, he couldn't come to the date because of urgent work, and the girl got really angry, and then they got awkward, and they eventually broke up. Itsuki then told the girl that she was like a child, being offended by such things. The girl was indignant and said, "What about the boy? If he says that he is an adult, then at least he should keep his promise." Itsuki lay on the grass and then stood up and said that he needed to apologize properly even if Wendy didn't forgive him. However, at that moment, the girl approached the boy. She asked him if she could sit next to him. Itsuki agreed. They started talking to each other at one point and then stopped. Itsuki jumped up from his seat. He turned to Wendy silently and then bowed deeply and apologized to her. Although he said he would do everything right, he sincerely apologizes now. Wendy was very surprised and then began to laugh. Wendy exhaled and said that this time she would forgive Itsuki, and then asked the boy if he knew that she had been waiting for him the whole time. The girl came closer and asked Itsuki not to leave her next time. Itsuki agreed with her. Then Wendy hugged him and said that it was a promise. Itsuki thought that Wendy had forgiven him, but then Shiro interrupted them and asked how Itsuki was doing with Wendy, and if they had made up since she was hungry. Wendy said that she would prepare dinner right away. Itsuki replied that Shiro could join him for a while after dinner. Sometime later, after the meal, Shiro and Itsuki were clearing away the dishes. Shiro turned to the boy and asked what his business was. Itsuki remembered it. He said that since he came to this world, he had always been protected. He wondered how he could protect himself. The boy then shows what she came up with. He uses magic and takes out a hammer. Wendy says it's amazing and then asks if it's a unique skill. Itsuki says it's spatial magic. When he came here, he thought it was an item box given to him by a goddess. Hayato, his friend, gave him a magic bag, so he had no chance to use it, but recently he leveled up and tested it. He activates spatial magic and uses a shield. Wendy doesn't understand what happened, and then Itsuki asks her to try touching him. Wendy touches him and realizes that it is some kind of invisible wall. Itsuki agrees and says that he can create transparent walls. He can use this to protect himself. The boy turns to Shiro and asks her to strike with this weapon. Shiro asks if the boy is really sure about this. Itsuki agrees and asks her to try with all of them. Shiro says that she starts and then suddenly attacks the boy. Itsuki realized that his wall was able to protect him. He then asks the girl to start attacking continuously. Shiro agreed and started attacking. Suddenly, Itsuki's wall crumbled. Itsuki says that means there is a limit to its durability, although that makes sense since unlimited use would be cheating. He then asks, how about a magic attack? Wendy interrupts him and says that she has learned most of the magic. If the boy wants, she can help with that. The boy is surprised and asks the girl to use magic. Wendy says that she will start and then casts a spell. Itsuki was ready for battle. Wendy used water shot, and Itsuki's wall cracked even faster and then completely shattered. The boy was splashed with water. Wendy asked if Itsuki was okay. Itsuki said that everything was fine. His barrier can handle both physics and magic, but its durability against magic is a little low. However, he has this. At least he can protect himself if something happens. Itsuki was happy and said that they were going to the city tonight, and in gratitude for the company, he will treat everyone in the evening. Shiro was very happy. At that moment, Aina and Sorte were fighting the monster. Sorte shouted to Aina that the monster was coming straight at her. Aina agreed and drew her sword. In an instant, she lunged forward and pierced the beast with her blade. Sorte then cut off the monster's horns and said that they had collected most of the materials in this area. Aina called her and said that the food was ready. Sorte tastes the food and says that it is better than yesterday. For starters, it is drinkable. Then Sorte told Aina that she didn't have to force herself to cook something complicated, because cooking normally wasn't that bad. Aina told Sorte that it wouldn't work. She, as a woman, is unlikely to be able to satisfy the master's needs. At least she wants to be useful in other matters. Sorte asked why cooking. Sorte thought about what she would say to Renge if she saw the current Aina. At this time, on the second fortress wall, a girl asked the guards to let her through because she had important things to do. The man refused and said that a message had come from the border fort. Even if she came, they should not let her in. The girl asked the reason for this decision. The man said it didn't matter how long, but that was it. The girl's name was Renge, and she said she had said several times that she had no money. Reng said that she was in a hurry, so she asked the guards to let her through. The sufferer replied that he would repeat himself, that they could not let even Reng through this time. The girl got angry. Then she pointed to the side and told the guards to turn around. The guard doesn't notice anything behind him and then turns right to Renge. The girl hits the guard on the head. He falls, and the girl runs straight to the gate. The second guard starts whistling into the scroll. Renge turned to Aina and Sorte and asked them to wait, because the girl was already on her way to them. At this time, Itsuki was walking around the square and suddenly noticed something strange, similar to a potato, but this creature was walking. Itsuki said that there was some strange thing walking around. Wendy said that it was moi. It must have escaped from some store. Itsuki asked the girl what moi was. Wendy said that it was a vegetable. Itsuki was surprised and asked if the vegetables here really walked. Wendy agreed and said that most of them did. She then asked if the vegetables in the master's world really didn't walk. Itsuki agreed and said that there probably weren't any walking vegetables, but at least there were fast-footed fish. Wendy was happy and said that it was very interesting. At that moment, Shiro grabbed moi and started chewing on him. The girl told the owner that she was very hungry. The young man told the girl that it was quite disgusting. He patted Shiro on the head and apologized, then asked Shiro if she wanted to eat. Shiro said that she was very hungry. Itsuki said that everything was decided and they would eat meat, and also said that he would feed the girl until she was full. Itsuki asked Wendy if she knew a good restaurant here. The girl agreed and told the young man to rely on her. They set off. Itsuki held Wendy and Shiro's hands, and when he and Wendy exchanged glances, they became embarrassed. Then they arrived at a restaurant and ate their fill of delicious food. Already at night, the guards patrolled the city and chased Rengi. The girl ran and said that the guards pestered her very much. She jumped from the roof. At that moment, Shiro said that she wanted to eat more. Itsuki was surprised that such a small body could fit so much. Renge was flying right above Itsuki and yelling at him to move aside and watch out. Itsuki turned around and in an instant Renge kneed him right in the face. They fell, knocking over the barrels nearby. Shiro took out her dagger. At that moment, the guards ran up and told the girl not to move and stop running away from them. She bared her claws and said that if they came any closer, Itsuki would not remain in one piece. The girl whispered to the boy, apologizing that she wanted the boy to help her at least a little. She asked him once more to help save her comrades. Wendy became afraid and called Shiro, and then the master. Itsuki said he was fine, so he asked Shiro to take Wendy home. The young man smiled. At that moment, the guard shouted at the girl not to cause herself any more crimes. Itsuki whispered to the girl to take him to the alley on the right and run. The girl grabbed Itsuki and led him into the alley. The guards ordered her to stop. Itsuki and Renge ran into an alley, but were chased by guards. Suddenly, Itsuki used third-level spatial magic. He created an invisible wall, which all the guards crashed into. The other guards asked what was going on, and one of the men said that for some reason he couldn't get through. Itsuki apologized to them and then told the girl that they should have a good time first. Renge agreed and then glanced at the boy slightly. At that moment, Itsuki and Renge were being watched by Shiro, who was right on the roof of the building. The girl recalled Wendy's words, who asked her to protect Mr. Itsuki. Shiro jumped off the roof and said that she knew everything herself. After some time, Itsuki and Renge were in a place very familiar to the young man. The girls were very kind and greeted the men. They also served cocktails and greeted guests, escorting them to their tables. Renge asked the boy what kind of place it was. Itsuki said that he knew the owner of the establishment, so they would simply use his influence. Renge said that the boy had brought her to such a place, and what he had planned to do with her. Itsuki replied that nothing of the sort. Even the guards' eyes would not reach such a place, so they would sit here. He then said that those men were guards, so he asked the girl what she had done. Renge replied that she was a little short of cash. Itsuki said that meant the girl had not paid the entrance fee. He then asked the girl what her name was. Renge introduced herself. Itsuki then said that the girl had recently said that she was going to save her comrades. Renge said that it was so. Her comrades are in trouble. She is an adventurer, and then asks the boy if he has ever heard of the Scarlet Line. Her comrades are members of this group named Aina and Sorte. Some time ago, she received a letter from Sorte. A man had apparently kidnapped them. She gives the boy a piece of paper and says that this is the same letter. Sorte asked Renge how she was doing. She and Aina are currently in captivity. They have become servants of a tramp, and he always licks them with his nasty eyes, and the other day he saw Aina without clothes. Itsuki was very angry, because the girl sent a very strange letter to Renge. Renge said that this is what happened, so she wants to find this man and save them both. Itsuki asked the girl to stop and said that he wanted the girl to calm down and listen to him. The tramp from this letter is most likely himself. Renge laughed and said that it was a bad joke. Suddenly, a female employee sat down next to them and asked Itsuki if he was really going to take over the entire Crimson Frontier. Renge suddenly got angry and engaged Itsuki in hand-to-hand combat. Aina, Sorte, and Renge sat in the Adventurers Guild for several months. A bundle was brought to Aina. The girl asked if this was really a quest for them, and a personal one at that. The girl replied that it was an urgent request from Rukaku and, as usual, was directed to Renge. Sorte unwrapped the package and said that it seemed that way, and that the package was indeed for Renge. The girl asked if it was really an earth dragon, and then it would be better to hurry. Aina asked if they really come all the time. Renge agreed and said that she was used to it. She would quickly figure it out and come back. Sorte asked Renge if she could handle it. Renge said it was easy. Sorte asked the girl not to let her guard down and be careful, because Renge was so careless. Renge smiled and said that it meant they had decided, and she would warm up little by little. After some time, Renge arrived in Rukaku. Renge wiped the sweat from her face and said that it was as hot as always. Suddenly, someone grabbed Renge by the tail. The girl turned around and saw the children there. The girl said that she knew it was Renge. The boy smiled and said that it really was his little sister. Renge greeted the children and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. She asked Sue and Pam how they were doing. Then she asked Sham what had happened to him and why they were so wounded. Shama said that she was hurt by an earth dragon. He was returning home after trading with his dad, and the dragon attacked them. He hurt his dad's leg, so his mom works and takes care of him, so it's very hard. Renge asked the boy to cheer up. She gives the boy something in his hands and says that she wants him to give it to his dad. Shama asked if it was really money. Renge replied that she remembered that she had a bill with Shama's dad, so she apologized for being late. Shama asked if it was really like that. Renge asked Sham to say hello to her dad. Then the girl said that she was starving, so she was going to eat. The girl invited the children to join her. The children agreed. After some time, she fed everyone with delicious food. Then, closer to the evening, the girl arrived at the Adventurers Guild. The man apologized to the guest and said that now, due to the commotion with the earth dragons, there were no people left. Renge greeted the man and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The man was surprised and asked if she could really come. Renge apologized and said that she had come all the way from Yahello. The man replied that he had heard the rumors too. Renge apologized to the man for disturbing him right away, but she needed some equipment and information. The man agreed and said that the earth dragons appeared about 3 months ago. Maybe they survived the last time, or there were eggs left. They had local adventurers and a self-defense group to destroy them. However, despite this, the skin of the earth dragon is so hard that normal weapons have no chance. When they are sated from attacking people, they dive under the sand and sleep until the next hunt. It is almost elusive, and they will not be able to cope with it. Renge watched them and thought that there were probably 3 of them. They were last seen 5 days ago, in the southern oasis. That was all the information. Renge said that it was right that she came here alone. Aina would have endured, but Sorte would have been in a very bad mood in such an ambush. She watched the mannequin hanging on a tree branch. Suddenly there was some kind of storm under the mannequin, from which an earth dragon emerged. The monster examined the mannequin and did not understand what it was. Renge said that 3 days of waiting, and finally the first dragon appeared. She rips off her cloak and says that it is time for punishment. The girl calls the dragon a common lizard. This time it is his turn to be eaten. The girl enters into battle with the dragon. At this time, Aina came after her bath and told Sorte that the bath was free. The girl said that she would finish it and go. Aina asks if it's really a letter. Sorte agrees and says that they've been through a lot too, so she decided to tell Renge about it and what's going on. Sorte looked out the window and said that she hoped Renge was okay. At that moment, the girl was fighting the earth dragon. The dragon swings its tail. Renge dodges it with skill, but at one point she misses a blow. The girl jumps aside and says that the dragon's defense is very strong after all. Then the girl says that she will be serious from now on. The girl makes a dash and attacks the dragon, causing damage to it. The girl hits the dragon between the stones and takes out something slimy from there. The dragon was killed. Renge wiped her face and said that there were 2 dragons left. 2 weeks later, Renge was bathing in an oasis. The girl returns to the village and says it took longer than she thought. The children added that it was simply amazing. Beat the earth dragon alone. Everyone in the city is very grateful to Renge. Shema said that his father will also be able to walk soon, and all thanks to Renge. The girl said that it was good. Then Renge comes to the Adventurers Guild. The guild leader says that the girl really saved everyone. The girl says that it's nothing special, and that it's also her job. The man apologized to the girl and said that he couldn't prepare much money now. He would send it to the girl's guild later. Renge said that she would leave the processing of the corpses to them. Then the guild leader says that the girl has received a letter. Renge is very surprised and asks where the letter came from. The leader replies that it came from Yahello. The girl realized that the letter was sent by Sorte. She began to read it, and then ran out of the guild in anger. The guild leader asked what was wrong. Renge apologized to the man and said that she had urgent business, so she would come back next time. The guild leader said that the girl was very busy, and that she had forgotten the letter sheet. At that moment, the girl ran and begged Aina and Sorte to wait. She was saying that she would definitely destroy this man. At that moment, she wanted to hit Isatiki, and the young man covered his head with his hands. Suddenly, Shiro appeared between them and told the girl that it was enough. If she did anything else, Shiro would kill her. Itsuki was very surprised by Shiro's appearance. Renge ordered Shiro to get away, but Shiro protected Itsuki. Renge threw a punch, but Shiro defended herself with her blade. Renge told Shiro that she was in the way. At that moment, the patrons of the establishment became very scared, because the situation was quite dangerous. Then the men ran up to the girls and asked what they were doing. Renge was distracted, but at that moment Shiro disappeared from her field of vision, and the next moment Shiro appeared from the side and was already swinging her sword. Renge tried to defend herself, but suddenly Shiro's dagger crumbled from the girl's hands. The next moment, Shiro used her leg to attack. Renge grabbed Shiro's leg and said that she was really in the way. Renge then threw Shiro aside. Shiro flew straight towards the female employee. The girl turned her back and screamed. At that moment, Shiro landed softly on her back and also softly jumped away from her. Renge told Shiro that she had paid for it, since she was a good target. The girl swung her fist, but Shiro very deftly pushed off the girl's hand and jumped over her. Shiro then flipped in midair and delivered a kick to the back of Renge's head. She then landed and Renge was sent flying. Shiro was beside herself with rage. She unsheathed her claws and said that she would kill Renge. Itsuki took the girl's hand and told Shiro that she was Aina and Sorte's comrade. Renge said that Aina and Sorte are her comrades, so she will save them both. Itsuki told Shiro that they will run away. He thought that it was useless to say anything now. In any case, he needed to contact Ina and Sorte and ask them to explain the situation. At that moment, Renge threw the table straight towards Itsuki. Shiro grabbed him by his clothes and pushed him aside so that the table would not hit the boy. The girl said that she would hold Renge back, so the master should run. Shiro said that everything was fine and she probably wouldn't kill her. Itsuki apologized to Shiro and said that he was counting on her. The girl rushed away, but Renge activated a magic seal and said that she would never let him go. In an instant, a multitude of spikes appeared around her. Shiro was able to defend herself, but the line of spikes reached Itsuki and injured him. Itsuki fell and clutched his wound. He thought about how it hurt and then found blood on his hand. Itsuki cringed and wondered if it was really his blood or why it hurt so much. Shiro ran up to her master and told him to hold on. Renge ordered Shiro to get out of the way, but the girl didn't move. In an instant, Yasus appeared and said that it was enough. The herd of knights that surrounded Renge caught up. At this moment, Shiro was sitting next to Itsuki. Yasi said that when he heard that the client was in danger, he rushed here immediately, and it was a little bad. At this moment, Wendy was pushing her way through the knights and asking them to get out of the way. Seeing Itsuki wounded, she became scared and asked Itsuki to hold on. Itsuki was writhing in pain. Yasis asked Wendy to calm down and told her to give the boy first aid for now. He then handed her a bottle of potion. Eve opened the bottle of potion and asked the gentleman to be patient a little longer while she treated the wound. At this point, Ren was surrounded by guards. One of the guards said that from now on, the girl was under arrest. She must not offer useless resistance. At that moment, the girl raised her leg but was ordered not to move. Suddenly, a magical seal appeared right under the girl's leg. She used sticky mud. All the guards couldn't move. At that moment, Renge jumped straight towards the boy. She thought furiously that she would kill a guy like Itsuki. Suddenly, Shiro was right behind the girl. She bounced off the ceiling and flew straight into Renge, pinning her right to the floor. Yasus turned to the guard and asked him to take the girl into custody while they could. The guard agreed. Yasis turned to Shiro and said that the girl helped. Shiro said that it did not matter, because now it was necessary to save the master. Wendy asked to take Itsuki to the Adventurers Guild. Yasus asked the girl why he needed to be taken to the Adventurers Guild. Wouldn't the church or the hospitals be more reliable? Wendy replied that the master's potions were there and that it was closest from here. Yasus agreed with the girl. Then the guards interrupted them and asked what they should do with Renge. Yasus said that they could take her to his mansion and he would talk to the Lord himself. Yasus looked menacingly at Renge. Then, in the Adventurers Guild, Itsuki woke up. Wendy was next to his bed. You were very surprised that the boy woke up. Itsuki called Wendy, and the girl said that everything was fine. Itsuki was surprised that he was in the guild, and then asked why he was there. Wendy replied that they had borrowed the room to treat the master. Itsuki remembered that he was injured. Then Shiro threw herself into the boy's arms. The girl cried and apologized to the boy. Itsuki looked at her questioningly and asked why Shiro was apologizing. The girl replied that Shiro had failed to protect her master properly, which is why her master had been injured. She apologized to the boy. Itsuki smiled and asked what the girl was talking about. If it weren't for Shiro, he would have been in serious trouble. He grabs the girl's face and thanks her. Itsuki then turns to Wendy and apologizes to her for disturbing her. Wendy smiles and replies that everything is fine. The guild leader said that when the girls brought him in, they were in a panic because he had a hole in his side. Itsuki asked if that was true. Wendy said that the master's potion closed the wound, but a scar may remain. The guild leader asked who did this to the boy. Suddenly, Itsuki jumped out of bed and asked if Aina and Sorte had returned. The guild leader said that they hadn't shown up here yet. Itsuki turned to Shiro and asked if the girl knew what happened to them. Shiro just shook her head. Suddenly, Aina appeared in the doorway and said that Renge was currently at Yashisa's mansion. Itsuki was surprised that Aina had returned. He said that he had something to talk to the girl about. Aina replied that Yasus had told her everything that had happened. Aina bows and says that she is very sorry for what happened. She knows that it will not end with a simple apology, but it is the least she can do now. The guild leader asked what the girl was talking about and why Aina was apologizing at all. Aina said that Renge had attacked the master. Everyone in the guild was surprised, and the leader asked why this had happened again. Wendy asked who Reng was. Aina replied that Reng was a former member of her group. Wendy asked how Aina's comrade could do such a thing. Wendy demanded Aina to explain, because one wrong move and the master's life could be in danger. Itsuki asked Wendy to calm down. Itsuki then asked Aina why Sorte was not with her. At this point, in Yasu's mansion, a man tells Renga that she has done many things, not paying the Rukaku entrance tax. She also broke through the castle gates and attacked the guards. The girl also destroyed an establishment under his jurisdiction and attempted murder. Then Yasu said that the man was currently receiving treatment and would live. The man sympathized with the girl. Reng began to resist and break free, but Yasus told the girl not to even try, because it was useless. Even she would not be able to break this chain. It is made of special steel for catching high-level monsters. It is also used to disperse magical power, so the girl will not be able to use magic. He also doesn't want the girl to destroy the mansion, like his establishment. Renge gritted her teeth. At that moment, Sorte ran down the hall. She burst into the room and called range. Sorte asked Yasus not to be cruel to Renge. Yasus said he was not cruel. One of his shops was destroyed and Sorte's owner was almost killed. Sorte is the reason for all this. If she hadn't sent that letter to Renge, none of this would have happened. Sorte began to shake with fear. Yasis asks if the girl really didn't want it. Whether she wanted it or not, the result is what she sees it as. An important business partner almost died, and the girl's friend became a criminal. He says it's all Sorte's fault. Renge yelled at the man to stop, then asked him why he was blaming Sorte for everything, since she had done all of this. She didn't regret anything, since it was all to protect Sorte and Aina. Sorte shouted at Renge that she was wrong, that everything was not like that she and Aina had not been treated cruelly. Renge asks the girl what she is talking about. Sorte starts crying and apologizes to the girl. Yasus said that Sorte and Aina made a contract with Itsuki, but the contract was for debt service. Because of the damage caused to Itsuki by the adventurers, Aina and Sorte took the blame on behalf of the guild. The two of them became servants, but he heard that they had a good relationship. So the content of this letter is not true, however. If the girl had read the entire letter, none of this would have happened. He shows the letter to the girl and says that it is a continuation of the letter that Renge left at the guild in Rikaku. It was sent from there today. Then Yasus says it's time to get to the heart of the matter. Sorte is also guilty of incitement. He asks if the girl understands what will happen to her now. Sorte starts to cry. She thinks about how she hated Itsuki the moment she met him. He was always laughing stupidly, getting between them, and it made her angry. She also didn't like the way Aina smiled at him. She felt like her place had been taken. She wished Itsuki would leave them sooner. However, he didn't reject her when she thought that way. She thinks that teasing, being angry, laughing were also good. She doesn't know when she started feeling this. The girl thinks that she is very ashamed because she wrote such a stupid letter. She had put the boy in danger, and she had also treated Renji cruelly. The girl fell to her knees in front of Yasus and began to apologize. It was all her fault, and she would do anything, so she asked the man to just forgive Renga. Reng started screaming and asking Sorte to shut up, because Yasis is a dealer in illegal goods, and if the girl says so, she will be tied up by him. Rengi screams that she did it, so the letter has nothing to do with it. If she is to be punished, then only she should be punished. Sorte started apologizing to the girl and saying that she made the kind Renge do this. The girl says that she is very sorry. She cried and apologized to Renge. Yasus clapped his hands and said that it was simply amazing. As expected from the people of the Scarlet Boundary, the strength of the bonds was also excellent. However, the law is absolute before everyone, so crying and screaming will not help. He points to Sorte and Renge and says that they will now obey the Lord's orders according to the law. He says that criminal service will suit them. The famous adventuress becomes an easy girl. He is sure that Sorte will be very popular. Renge called the man at that moment. Yasa said that her behavior was a crime. Unfortunately, he can't do anything about it. The law holds him accountable. Suddenly, Itsuki interrupts the conversation and speaks, apologizing for interrupting the conversation, but he asks if Yasus wants to listen to him. He thinks that the man will not lose anything from this. Sorte was surprised by the man's appearance. Itsuki entered the dungeon room. Aina, sad and scared, followed him. The guy extended his hand and said that it would be good if everyone listened to him first. Itsuki wanted to convince Yasis that the man had missed something important. Yasis saw the young man and greeted him in surprise. The merchant asked if the boy was feeling better. Itsuki scratched his nose and said that he was already feeling much better, and it was all thanks to the potion that Yasis gave him. The young man began to walk further into the dungeon room and also saw Sorte, who was kneeling and shaking. Itsuki immediately turned to the girl. The girl bowed before the gentleman and began to repent, saying that she had done something irreparable. After that, Sorte began to apologize, repeating the same thing several times. Tears started to flow from her eyes, and it was obvious that the girl was very scared. Itsuki stroked her head and said that it was not like that at all. The guy also added that he would protest about the contents of the letter later. Now they needed to sort out the situation that had developed. The guy continued to stroke Sorte, saying that he would definitely do something to her and Reng. Sorte began to cry even harder. Then Itsuki hugged the girl and quietly asked her to trust him. Sorte could not answer anything clearly, but she began to nod her head slowly. Renge, who was chained, was watching all this closely. The girl was very surprised that Sorte was so remorseful in front of this young man. Itsuki smiled and turned to Yashisu. The guy said that the merchant could have already let Renge go, because Itsuki doesn't really like such things. Yasis looked at the young man languidly and said that he could not do this now. The man explained that Renge was a dangerous criminal who should be in custody. Itsuki spread his hands and asked not to say such things about the girl. The young man also said that he would like to discuss everything, but he does not really like the situation that is currently developing around him. Yasis cut him off short, saying that there was no room for discussion. The merchant added that the Lord himself would now decide what to do with Renge and Sorte. Itsuki said that he was willing to drop the damage case and pay for Yasis's shop. In addition, Itsuki promised that he would be able to pay extra for the apologies that the girls would supposedly give him as moral compensation. When he asked if such a proposal would suit Yasis, it was clear that the merchant was thinking. Then Yasis said that Itsuki almost died, and now he is deliberately forking out money asking to forgive the criminal. The man closed his eyes and shook his head, saying that Itsuki was very good-natured and that someday it could play a cruel joke on him. The young man nevertheless thought that they could find a common language, but Yasis firmly said that he could not release the girl. Itsuki said that he, as the victim, was filing a lawsuit himself and was ready to compensate everyone else. Aina intervened in the conversation, saying that she was also asking for Renge and Sorte. The girl also added that she was ready to take responsibility for what happened, and was also ready to compensate for everything. Yasis turned to the girl and said that he was willing to consider compensation from Aina, but then she would become a criminal slave instead of the two of them. Itsuki was very surprised by this turn of events. Aina said that if it was necessary and the girls were forgiven, then she was ready to take such a step. Sorte started crying, persuading Aina to make such a decision. Sorte also shouted that Aina should not do such a thing under any circumstances. Itsuki quickly agreed with Sorte, persuading Aina. The young man put his hand on the girl's shoulder and said that her action would not change anything, and they would still have one of their own in prison. Yasis looked at the boy and quoted him, beating Itsuki himself to the punch. Yasis said that the boy probably wanted to close the case without anyone getting hurt. Itsuki said that was exactly what he was going to do. The guy raised his voice and was about to make his demands. Yasis stopped him and said that the guy had misunderstood something. Yasis added that the guy's apologies and forgiveness will not resolve this issue, so something more substantial needs to be considered. Yasis also said that whoever commits a crime, no matter the reason, must be held accountable so that general order is maintained in the city. The man said that he was a citizen of Yahello, so he had to obey the law and order of that city. Afterwards, Yasis told the boys to voluntarily surrender and retreat. Itsuki thought about these words. Then he turned to Yasis and said that the man's words were true, and they were also an irrefutable argument. However, Itsuki continued, adding that Yasis was also a merchant, and therefore the boy was interested in what Yasis thought specifically from the commercial side of things on this issue. Yasis didn't quite understand the guy, and interest hadn't yet appeared in his eyes. The man asked what Itsuki meant. Itsuki spread his hands and said that he is a vagabond and has a lot of knowledge that Yasus himself does not have. It is for this reason that Yasus knows no worse than him, that there is money in this world and what role it plays. Besides, Itsuki thought that alchemy had its own significant prospects, so he had a small plan. Yasus still didn't understand what exactly the young master wanted to say. Itsuki said that Yasus could make him a one-sided loan if Yasus understood what was going on. Itsuki urged them to finish right here and now. Yasus said indignantly that Itsuki, apparently, did not hear what the merchant was telling him. Itsuki said that he was offering a slightly crazy option, and he himself understood it. Itsuki said that he wanted to deal with Yasus now as a merchant. Afterwards, the boy offered the man a fight on the rules of trade. Itsuki also added that it doesn't matter what it will be and how. The only question is that he will be able to fulfill the conditions that Yasus himself will choose, and this will be their competition. The young man also added that if he could win within these limits, he wanted Renge and Sorte to be free from all punishments. Yasus said that Itsuki was offering him to turn a blind eye to all the crimes if he won the bet, but the man himself didn't even have the authority to do such things. Itsuki wasn't sure if it was true. He told the man that he had great confidence in Yoshisa, because the merchant could really do it. Yasus bowed his head and thought about it, exhaling quickly several times. The man said that to some extent he could certainly do something about it, but since all this that is being thought up now is illegal, he must bear a certain risk. Afterwards, Yasus asked the boy about what would happen if Itsuki lost. The young man, without thinking twice, immediately shouted that he himself was ready to become Yasus's slave in the event of his defeat, to be a slave for the rest of his life. Aina and Sorte stared at the young man in surprise. Renge couldn't stand it any longer, and was the first to break the silence in the room that had formed after Itsuki's words. The girl shouted that the young man seemed not to understand that he was talking nonsense. She couldn't believe that he was willing to subject himself to such a thing for another. The girl accused the guy of going too far in his beliefs. Itsuki bowed his head and thought for a while. Afterwards, the guy said that it was all because Renge was a friend of Aina and Sorte, so he was willing to do such a thing. Renzio immediately remembered what had happened earlier in those situations where Itsuki had already shown himself as a person. She understood that he had never wished her harm. After Renge hung on her arms, which completely relaxed, and tears began to appear on her face, the girl thought that all this time she had behaved very stupidly. Little Shiro came up from behind. She pulled Itsuki's clothes and told the boy that he shouldn't mess with Yasus. Shiro also wanted to make sure that everything was okay between them. Itsuki turned to her and smiled widely. The guy said that he understood everything perfectly. Then he asked Shiro if the girl considered him a loser. Shiro smiled but did not respond. It was clear that she trusted her master. Yasus began to laugh loudly, saying that Itsuki was a very interesting person. Afterwards, he said that he, Yasus, as a merchant was being called to a competition, and if he backed down now, it could hurt his reputation. It was for this reason that the man agreed and was ready to take on the competition. Itsuki was a little nervous, but nevertheless happy when Yasus accepted his agreement. The boy asked about what conditions the merchant wanted to set. Yasus looked calmly at the young man and asked him if Itsuki remembered the competition that was held with Dadaro. Itsuki said that he remembered. Yasus said that the conditions would be the same as then. In 1 week, they would have to receive 120 million local currency, that is, Nor. Yasus also added that if the young man could collect this amount as compensation for his store, then in that case he would directly win the competition. However, in this competition, the assistance of the Adventurers Guild and the Alchemists Guild, as well as the sale of the Pink Rotor, the rights to which belong to him and Itsuki, are all prohibited from being used. Itsuki agreed. Afterwards, Yasus added that cooperation with the Scarlet Frontier would be allowed. Yasus addressed the boy as an interested party and asked if Itsuki would agree to this. Itsuki clenched his fist and said that he agreed to these conditions. Yasus announced that in that case, for now, Sorte and Renge would be staying with him, so Itsuki could take them with him. When they all left the confinement room together, they were immediately greeted by the bright sun outside. Itsuki walked and began to stretch, saying that it had been a very long night. Suddenly the boy heard someone behind him trying to get his attention and say something. When he turned around, he saw Renge approaching him. The girl bowed her head and said that she was very sorry for what she had done. Renge also added that she understood perfectly well because such things are not forgiven, but she really wanted to apologize. Sorte began to stand up for her friend, stepping forward. The girl said that Renge was not guilty of anything, and it was all Sorte's fault. When she began to apologize, Itsuki began to stretch out his hands to her. The boy gently grabbed her cheeks and began to squeeze them. Itsuki said that if she was unhappy, she could just say so. The boy also reminded her that they were on the same side. Afterwards, Itsuki turned to Renge and said that she too didn't have to worry about anything. The boy pointed to his wound and said that as they could see, it was already fine. Aina also said that she was very sorry for everything that had happened recently. She was extremely embarrassed, but Itsuki also told her that everything was fine. Itsuki smiled and said that now they could finally all go home and have a good rest, since absolutely everyone had had a hard time and the day had been hard. Finally, they arrived home. When the whole group arrived at the door, Wendy greeted them. Shiro and Itsuki sensed that the girl was very angry. Itsuki immediately stepped forward and apologized to Wendy. He said that they didn't want to leave her alone for such a long time, and besides, she was looking after the house. Wendy ignored the boy's apology and walked towards Renge. Wendy called her by name, then raised her hand and slapped the girl. Itsuki was very scared when he saw all this. Wendy turned to Itsuki decisively and said that everyone could go ahead and wash their hands, and then proceed to the dining room. Wendy said that breakfast was already on the table and was getting cold. Then the girl turned to Renge and said that she felt the same way about everyone else. Itsuki wanted a little explanation, so he lingered a little near Wendy. When he called her, the girl turned around and said that she no longer intended to leave such things behind. Itsuki apologized to her once more and scratched the back of his head. Afterwards, they all went to the dining room, where a sumptuous table was indeed set. It was then that Itsuki thought that this world was far from parallel to his previous one, but a measured life was not yet close, so they still had something to work on. Morning came, and Itsuki was peacefully basking in his bed. The sun had already broken through the windows and illuminated the boy's room. He hugged his pillow and slowly began to open his eyes. The guy greets the reader mentally and says that his full name is Shinomiya. Itsuki. A lot has happened since he came here to another world. His measured life was full of difficulties. A small misunderstanding leads to an attempt on his life, and the guy was already subjected to it not so long ago, literally the other day. Then he was stabbed in the stomach by Renge's blade. The boy began to lose consciousness and slowly fall. Sorte caught him and began to cry, saying that she was very sorry. Now, Itsuka still managed to get through all of this and save his life, but now he has to compete with Yasis to free Sorte and Renge. It seems like his measured life is still far away. Now the boy had 7 whole days left until the deadline in the competition with the merchant Yasis. Itsuke was sitting at his desk, making something. It was not easy for the guy, because he spent almost the whole day at his desk. He exhaled and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The words of Yasis, who repeated the terms of his bet, were spinning in the guy's head. Itsuke understood that it didn't matter how many accessories he could make in that time, because it definitely wouldn't be enough. The pink rotor was also forbidden. Itsuke got up from the table and went to the door. He was very tired. The guy said that right now he had about half of what he owed. But where would he get another 60 million Nora? Suddenly, Shiro peeked out from around the corner and turned to the owner. The girl wanted to know where the young man was going. Itsuke was a little surprised, and then answered that he wanted to take a bath. After Shiro came closer, Itsuka added that he wanted to freshen up and clear his head. Shiro thought for a moment and said that she should take a bath too then. Afterwards, they went into the room together and began to undress. Itsuke said that Wendy was feeling uncomfortable from stealing too much of Shiro's food. The girl only replied that she was doing it because she was hungry. Itsuke added that the girl should stick to some measure. As they walked further, they suddenly saw Renge and Sorte in the bath, who immediately stared back. Itsuke immediately covered himself, feeling very awkward. The guy shouted out words of apology. Sorte at that moment blushed deeply and swung a small ladle. After that, she calmed down a little and covered her body from Itsuke. The girl continued to blush and also asked the young man not to look at them. Itsuke couldn't figure out the reason why the girl had such a reaction. He assumed that her character had changed and immediately asked Sorte herself about it. Sorte suddenly grabbed the same ladle, and this time she did not hold back, throwing it at the guy. She shouted for Itsuke to be quiet. Sorte said that Itsuke was acting rather stupidly. The guy only added that he knew it. Shiro approached Renge and addressed the girl. When Renge herself turned and looked at Shiro, the little girl spread her arms and asked to be washed. Renge agreed. She poured some bath soap into her palm and then began to soap Shiro's head. Renge asked the girl to close her eyes so that the soap would not get there. Renge started the conversation by adding that she wanted to apologize to Shiro for what happened yesterday. Renge asked if Shiro was hurt. The girl replied that she was fine. After that, Shiro relaxed completely and said that Renge was amazing. Shiro also said that she had put a lot of effort into her attack that time, but Renge had survived. This made Shiro respect her, and the girl said that Renge was strong. Renge started laughing. She turned her head to Itsuka, who was still arguing with Sorte, and quietly said that she even smiled a little. At the same time, Aina and Wendy were sitting in the kitchen. Aina was trying some dessert, saying that it was very tasty. Wendy, who was cooking all this, thanked the girl for the good review. Wendy also added that this sweet is very tasty with tea, but also good as a snack. The gentleman told her that it tastes very similar to something high in calories. Wendy also added that there was something she wanted to tell Aina about the next time at work. Aina stared at Wendy and did not understand what had caused such a reaction. Aina said that she wanted to apologize. The girl added that she was also a slave of the master, but she could do absolutely nothing for him, as much as Wendy does. As one of the members of the Scarlet Frontier, Aina had to do something, but in the end, she had to rely on the master himself and his help. Afterwards, Aina looked forward and said that she felt pathetic and completely helpless, or even useless. Wendy suddenly said that she agreed with her. Then she added that she had previously given her body and soul to the master. Now she was ready to do absolutely anything for him. But, despite all this, the master does not allow her to do this. This always happens to her, and she only receives praise, which, as it seemed to her, she is completely unworthy of. Wendy remembered Itsuke telling her that this was the reason he wanted to be with her. Wendy wanted everything. She also remembered Itsuke telling her that he liked her. It was for this reason that the girl was also upset. Aina raised her eyes and looked at Wendy, asking her if this was really so. Wendy just smiled and said that she thought of things that only Aina could do, and there certainly were. Aina smiled and said that Wendy was right. Afterwards, the girl said that she would also try for the master. After some time, Itsuke was quite gloomy because time was running out and there were already 5 days left. The guy understood perfectly well that even with his workshop fully loaded, the production of items was limited. There was no time to ask Aina and the others to gather resources either. The guy needed to come up with something urgently, because at this rate, he would definitely become a toy for the scary Uncle Yasis, whom he imagined behind him with a whip. Itsuke tried to quickly push such thoughts away, telling himself that he would definitely not allow such a thing. The boy clenched his fist and thought that he could rely on Darwin, but after remembering his face, Itsuke suddenly decided that this would definitely be the worst possible outcome for him. Itsuke knew for sure that he had to do something to avoid losing this competition. Wendy distracted him from his thoughts and said that the master had a guest. Itsuke met the guest. The guy was nervous and did not understand what exactly she was doing. The girl smiled and said that it had been a long time since their last meeting. It was Darwin's daughter. The young man looked away, thinking that he hadn't done anything yet. Then Itsuke turned to Mira and also said that they really hadn't seen each other for a long time. The girl noticed that Itsuke's voice had become hoarse. When Itsuke asked about the business Mira had come to see him about, the girl brought tea to her lips and said that she had heard about an incident that had happened to them not long ago at the brothel. Afterwards, Mira smiled and started laughing. The girl said that she found it very interesting. Itsuke, with a serious face, replied that they were not interested at all right now. Mira continued, starting to ask her own questions. The girl asked first about whether Itsuka could really earn the stated amount of money. Itsuke noticed that Mira knew quite a lot. The guy extended his hand to the side and said that this question was still quite difficult for him. Mira said that she understood Itsuka perfectly. The girl agreed that the boy must be having a really hard time right now. Then Mira said something a little unexpected. The girl asked why Itsuki in that case didn't just take another look at himself. The guy was surprised. Mira triumphantly declared that Itsuki was a vagabond. The girl also added that the goddess had given him such a skill, if she was not mistaken. Itsuki began to think, saying that the skills pocket money and alchemy would not be able to bring him the required amount in such a short time. Mira leaned towards the boy, saying that he didn't seem to be thinking about any changes. Mira said that he could, for example, try to discover a new skill. Itsuki thought seriously about these words that Mira was trying to convey to him. The guy took out a small card, deciding to test his abilities first. The guy had several passive, unique, and active skills, among which were his already favorite alchemy, pocket money, evaluation, as well as spatial magic. Itsuki immediately noticed that his alchemy skill had become quite high, and was already much more developed than everyone else. Suddenly, he noticed something in the corner of the map. It was written there that the boy also had the properties of multi-copy and formation. Itsuki returned to his workshop and looked at the resources and blanks. Suddenly, the boy had an idea. Multi-copy. As the name suggests, this skill copies things. However, items with status effects, such as magic items and potions, are degraded. That is, they are copied poorly. Hand molding is a skill of freely manipulating materials. The boy understood that the materials to use depended on the level of alchemy he possessed. With the help of hand molding, he can make a turnaround faster than ever before. Also, the capabilities of multi-copy are not so good, but still, he can now mass-produce everything. This skill could be used on the pink rotor, but this time Yasis forbade it. In that case, something will have to be done about the mass production of accessories. Itsuki raised his head, thinking that now it was just a matter of selling materials. When it came to mass sales in the short-term first perspective, then he already remembered Mira's words about his class. Itsuki at once. The boy suddenly understood everything. He looked at Mira and said that he would have a small request for the girl, a very important one. Afterwards, the young man announced in the house that everyone would gather at a certain time on the first floor. All the girls went down to the designated line, looking intently at Itsuki. The girls immediately began to loudly say that they were ready to do absolutely everything that their master told them. Sorte, Renge, and Aina impatiently awaited new instructions. Itsuki saw their strong zeal, but the guy now rather needed calm. He stopped the girls, calling on them to calm down and wait a little. Itsuki said that his task would not be difficult at all. The guy pulled out a small list and said that he wanted to ask the girls to collect everything on the list. Itsuki also apologized and said that he wanted to ask the girls to do it all as quickly as possible. He also had one main request left. The young man raised his finger and said that he would also like all 3 girls to take part in this matter. Aina sighed sadly and said that she understood everything. Sorte hugged her friend and began to console her, saying that everything was fine, and she was ready to do everything possible, even part of Aina, if necessary. Itsuki said that he didn't exactly mean that, what the girls thought. Afterwards, he explained everything, and they got a full picture of the task that needed to be completed. Sorte and Renge immediately rushed to the door, shouting that they were ready to end this very quickly. Aina added that they would return in the morning for the occasion. Itsuki only added that he was counting on the girls. Afterwards, the gentleman turned to Wendy and said that he had a small favor to ask of her as well. Wendy said that she would listen to the gentleman with great pleasure and then ask him to rely on her. While everyone was getting ready and receiving their assignments, Shira was sleeping peacefully on the couch, gathering her strength. She didn't even hear anything happening in the hall. It was evening. Itsuki stood in his workshop, his hand outstretched. The boy kept thinking about his new skills. He knew he had to try to use them. The young man understood that such a quantity in one day would be enough to kill, and he consumed the potions like energy drinks. Now there was one last task. Everything had to be sold, and that was to be done by tomorrow. Wendy covered the boy with a blanket, quietly saying that he had done a great job. The next day, Itsuki was very cheerful and active. The boy changed into his costume from another world and went outside. There were 4 days left until the deadline for the competition. The young man addressed everyone standing in the yard. Itsuke said that the goods were already prepared, and they only had to sell them all to make the required amount of profit. Now the goods were loaded into the cart. The girls raised their hands and shouted that they could sell all this like hotcakes. Then they began to solemnly rejoice, raising their hands up. A huge crowd of people gathered in the square. Surprised passers-by paid attention to this, thinking that some new and interesting store had opened in the city. One of the girls, whose company also stopped, called her friends to come closer to understand what all the fuss was about. Many girls stood and admired the goods in amazement. On a small stage stood Renge, Sorte, and Aina, who were dressed in luxurious outfits that had never been seen before by the local public. They looked incredibly beautiful. Itsuke stood nearby and urged people to come closer to check out his products. The guy shouted that he guaranteed performance at an affordable price. It was a new line of accessories with the Shinomiya symbol. The young man assured that his products were not only convenient and beautiful, but also provided various types of protection for their wearer. The supplier was the Scarlet Frontier, Adventurers of the A rank. In addition, the design is quite luxurious. It is not only an item of equipment for adventurers, but also ideal for ladies who want to dress up. Itsuke continued to explain that it was essentially an expensive accessory, but they were offering a special price for it today. After these words, a crowd of girls immediately rushed towards Itsuka with glowing eyes. Potential buyers wanted to buy the things that were shown on the adventurer girls. Itsuke was a little confused by this flow, but it made him very happy. Wendy was standing next to him, also smiling and helping the guy with the flow of customers. While Itsuke was taking out another batch of jewelry, someone approached him from behind. A girl's voice asked how things were going. When the young man turned around, he immediately saw Mera, who was smiling at him. Itsuke smiled back. Mera noted that, as she noticed, everything was going well between them. Shion stood at the very end, holding a sign that indicated where the end of the line was. Even she was not left without attention and was able to collect many compliments. Some noted that Itsuke's team focused on the designs for girls, asking Aina's group to wear them to encourage others to buy the products. Itsuke also said that besides that, girls have a weakness for shiny objects in any world. Mira laughed, saying that the guy had guessed this tendency perfectly. Itsuke also didn't forget to thank Mira for helping him and lending him a store in a good location. There really was a large flow of potential customers here. Mira said that if Itsuka really wanted to thank her, he could tell her stepbrother. After all, it was one of the facilities he managed. Itsuka was surprised, saying that he didn't want to owe him anything. Sorte appeared from around the corner and called out to Itsuke, asking him for a moment. The girl wanted to know about which accessories had a poison resistance effect. Itsuke said that he was already on his way back. The guy took the box and added that someday he would definitely be able to pay off this debt to Mira and her brother. Mira smiled and put her hands behind her back. The girl noticed that Itsuke was indeed a very interesting person. For the next 3 days, the guy produced and sold his goods in unlimited quantities, and then produced and sold again, and then the deadline arrived. Itsuke gathered all the girls and happily shouted that they had managed to achieve the target amount with their joint efforts, and that they had all worked hard during this time. Itsuke singled out Wendy separately, for which he thanked her. The girls' advice on design and selection really helped them become popular and gain great demand. Wendy smiled and became a little shy, saying that she was very happy to be of service to her master. Shion came up to them and said that she was very hungry. It was time to end this competition. Itsuke collected all the money and brought it to Yasu's mansion. He put it on the table and said that he was able to bring it all in one go. The local appraiser, who provided this kind of service to Yashisu, turned to the gentleman and said that, as expected, there was indeed a sum of 120 million nori on the table. Yasu smiled and said that, in that case, as he had promised, he himself would try to make sure that Sorte and Renge were not accused. Afterwards, he suggested that Itsuka have dinner together and celebrate their bet. Itsuke turned to the door and said that they could do it next time, because he still had some plans for today. The young man waved his hand and left. Itsuke and his team headed to the guild tavern where they were gathering. Loud voices, shouts, and cheers could be heard, as well as the clinking of mugs. Itsuke smiled and asked Sorte how much longer the girl could cry. Everyone happily urged each other to drink and relax. The young man took a few sips and then saw Sorte climb onto one of the tables and lift a barrel of ale. The girl shouted for everyone to drink more. Reng suddenly approached Itsuka. There seemed to be some kind of residue between them, and the girl continued to act a little uncertainly. Ranga apologized for causing Itsuka any inconvenience. The girl still felt bad about the situation where she hurt the boy, so she wanted to apologize properly. Itsuke remained silent, but then handed the girl a mug of his drink. Renge was very surprised by such an action on the part of the guy. Itsuke smiled and said that Renge didn't have to worry, because in the end everyone was safe, and that was enough for him. The girl smiled back and raised her glass to Itsuke. Itsuke was working in his laboratory. The guy pointed his hands at a small bottle of liquid and used his skill multi-copy, which he had started to master not so long ago. During this time, while he was conducting various experiments and working, the guy got tired. He exhaled and said that was enough for today. Turning his attention to the skill panel, the young man saw that he had raised his level again. Now his alchemy was at the 9th level, which was a very respectable indicator in this world. Suddenly he noticed something else. Among his skills, something new appeared, and it was called Famous Magic Circle. The young man was surprised and had no idea what it was. Itsuke was sitting at the table with his hands clasped together. Shion approached him and said that the owner had a gloomy face today. The guy started to move his hand towards her head. He began to pet Shion, saying that he had a growing household and quite a lot of expenses lately. That was the reason why he needed to work harder. Wendy looked at her master with concern and said that if he was having a hard time, he could tell the girls. Wendy was ready to help and added that she could work too. Itsuke immediately began waving his hands, saying that his main support and concern was to work. He refused several times, and then urged Wendy not to worry unnecessarily. Itsuke also said that he would do anything to make Wendy happy. Wendy replied that if he really needed help, he could really ask her, because she wanted to be happy with him. The guy exhaled and became embarrassed. Then he headed to one of the buildings in the city, where Itsuke was already expected. The guy begged Lytric to give him a job. He replied that the guy should not make such a creepy voice. The man looked at the vials Itsuke had brought him. Lytric said that his potions had been well received, and in general he could make arrangements with the right people. But the man immediately added that, despite all this, he was not going to support the teaching of alchemy because of his attraction to women. Itsuke was surprised by this interpretation. Itsuke also wanted to say a few words about this. He told everything, after which Lytric thoughtfully repeated the name of the boy's new skill. Itsuke explained that he had raised his alchemy level. He had also obtained many skills, such as manual molding, multi-copy, and so on, but while he was using them, he hadn't noticed that he had obtained the last one. Itsuke added sadly that he felt like he was missing out on the process of his progression when he created something and did this kind of work. Lytric stopped the boy, asking for a moment of attention. The man made a serious face, and then asked the boy if Itsuka had told anyone else in the city about his latest skill. The boy replied that he hadn't done it. Lytric immediately added that the boy should keep his mouth shut and not spread the word. Itsuke asked the reason. Lytric said it was a big deal. Not many alchemists could reach level 9. If Itsuke didn't want to be used for good, then he definitely needed to stop telling everyone about it. Itsuke said that he understood everything now. Lytric turned away, after which he immediately said that if the young man understood everything, then he could return to work. Lytric asked for 500 medium potions and had to make them for Itsuka in 3 days. The man was willing to meet him halfway and said he would sell them for Itsuka. Itsuke was very surprised by such a volume. The guy thought that Lytric was still the same rude old woman, but with all this, Itsuke was also able to develop and grow. When Itsuke came out, he thought that Lytric was basically right. Once the boy had developed his skills in the company, he had become accustomed to being used for their benefit all the time. Afterwards, he scratched his chin, adding that the exchange was a bit like a manga called Child of Alchemy, or something like that. Meanwhile, someone was catching up with him from behind. The girl screamed for Itsuke to quickly get out of her way. She repeated this a couple of times, continuing to run. Itsuke immediately thought that he was experiencing déjà vu. He had already started to turn around, but at that very second, the girl crashed into him at full speed, knocking the guy off his feet. The last thing she managed to say was, "Watch out." Itsuke was knocked off his feet and fell to the ground, keeping his eyes closed. The boy felt that he was in great pain. He also still did not understand what exactly that was. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the girl was sitting on his chest, scratching her head. It seemed that she had gotten a little bit of it too. The stranger blushed, feeling ashamed. Itsuki started screaming. The girl asked if the boy was okay. Itsuki immediately answered that he was not okay, and that the situation was bad for him in many ways. He called the girl to get off. The girl began to climb only higher to the place where Itsuki's head was now. The guy indignantly shouted that there was no need to climb there. The stranger answered that the young man should not move. After what happened, Itsuki was sitting by the fountain. The guy thought that those were terrible looks. He also asked the girl if she was hurt, to which she immediately answered positively. She immediately apologized, trying to explain what happened. As it turned out, the girl was running down the hill and could not stop properly. Itsuki said that she should listen to him now. The boy explained that there are many things that adults cannot take back. It was for this reason that the boy urged the girl not to run down the slopes anymore. The girl looked at Itsuki carefully and said that he was apparently a vagabond. Itsuki stared at her in surprise, asking how she could figure that out. The girl replied that she felt this atmosphere. After Ron, she put her hands behind her back and introduced herself. Her name was Olegal, and the girl added that she was pleased to meet you. Itsuki assumed that the girl lived somewhere around here, close to where they were meeting. Olegal replied that she did live nearby, in the city center. Itsuki thought for a moment, then said that the girl must have a very rich family if they could afford to live in the center. Olegal said that was true, since her father was the lord of the city. Itsuki laughed, thinking about how Olegal had thrown together so many amazing things for him in such a short time. The boy's interest grew with each passing minute. Suddenly, Itsuki became thoughtful and darkened. The guy looked at Olegal with fear and asked the girl not to tell anyone at home about what happened to her on the street today. Olegal said that such intonations scared her a little. Afterwards, they went together along the streets of the city. The girl asked about where Itsuki was going now. The guy answered that he was returning home. Olegal smiled and said that they could have a little date while they were heading out together. Itsuki was indignant that the girl wasn't listening to him at all. Olegal didn't understand why Itsuki would refuse her. Then she asked how long Itsuki had been in the city. The guy answered that he had been here for several months. A gorgeous view of the architecture opened up before them. Itsuki remarked that this city was quite nice because it was lively and at the same time everyone looked very happy. Olegal turned around and asked if the boy really thought that way. Itsuki smiled and said that it was true. He explained that the world he came from was not bad either, but he felt a little cramped there, or he couldn't allow himself to smile like he does now. Olegal was surprised by this story. Itsuki added that everything here is not as good as it should be. The guy introduced a monster with the heads of local lords, saying that this city is full of scary people. But despite all this, he really liked it here. Even though it was really hard sometimes, he could work, drink, eat, and laugh together in peace. That was the main reason why he liked living here. Olegal looked at the guy silently, and then said words of gratitude for such a statement. Itsuki looked at the girl in surprise, not understanding what she was getting at. Olegal said that she had lived in this city since she was born, so she was very glad that the boy liked this city. Then she turned around and started running. The girl waved her hand and smiled, shouting words of gratitude for today. Itsuki shouted after her not to run like that, because she might fall again. Meanwhile, a certain carriage stopped at a stone wall. The driver went down and opened the door for his master. A man came out and thanked the worker for his work. He also added that now the cab driver would have to stay here and guard. He immediately said that he would carry out this order. The man turned out to be Yasis. Yasis himself turned back to the servant and told him to warn the High Lord of his arrival in the city. When the Lord received the news, he invited Iasis to his huge palace. Iasis arrived with a report of the disturbances Renge had caused in the city earlier. The Lord listened to the merchant. He began to think and then added that they could leave everything as it was for now, since the victim himself was happy with how everything turned out. Itsuki's wishes into account to some extent. Yasis said that he would be very grateful for that. Lord replied that the man was acting unusually, since he had not helped other people before. Lord suggested that it was because Itsuke was a vagabond. Yasis did not deny it completely, adding that it was partly true, but there was also some connection. The man explained that Itsuke was a very interesting person and sometimes even reckless. Lord added that this is what she was talking about. She found it quite interesting and unusual to hear that Yasis was interested in another person and was trying to help him. Lord also added that Yasis is indeed right about this. She also emphasized that Itsuka is indeed an interesting person. Yasis was surprised by this answer. The man thought that the Lord might have already met the young man somewhere and asked her about it. The Lord replied that it could have been said that way. The Lord was Oligal 100 Anobioprcy. The girl smiled and said that Itsuke was even a little to her taste, but she wasn't 100% sure about it yet. Oligal started coughing, covering her face. Yasis immediately noticed this, saying with concern that the girl's health did not look too good. Oligal said that this was indeed the case. Yasis added that it was very bad. The girl said that Hayato's group seemed to be having a hard time right now, and yet it seemed that nothing would come of it. Yasis was saddened by this when he found out. Oligal said that there was nothing she could do about it. Now she is actively working on transferring her affairs. Yasis suddenly mentioned a certain person, but then immediately interrupted himself. He added that wishful thinking was a terrible thing for her, so he immediately apologized. Yasis bowed and said that he was leaving Oligal and would trust that the girl could take good care of herself. When Oligal was left alone, she became sad. The girl got up from her chair and went to the window. She said sadly that she would like to observe a little more of how this city lives. Itsuke's house. They were taking off the laundry that had already dried after washing. Wendy said that it was very windy outside today. The girl apologized to Reng for having to make her help with the housework. Reng replied that everything was fine and that she was free today. Wendy also asked about Aine and Sorte. She thought that the two had gone to the guilds to look at new quests. Renge replied that they had, and that the guild master had called them. Renge thought that Wendy was very beautiful. They packed their things, and Wendy added that it was already noon. Itsuke was in his workshop, so they could have a nice snack together first. Renge agreed. Shiro, Wendy, and Reng sat down at the common table and began to eat. On the table stood a pot of soup Wendy had cooked. Wendy smiled and turned to Shiro. The girl asked the little girl if she liked it, but most of the time, everything was visible. Renge watched all of this silently. Then Wendy turned to Renge, who was silently watching them. Wendy thought that their guest did not like the soup. Renge remembered how Wendy punished her for attacking the master. Reng suddenly stood up from her seat and bowed to Wendy. The girl immediately apologized very loudly, causing shock to the others at the table. Renge also tried to add, losing her train of thought, that she had not yet apologized to Wendy for her actions. After all, because of Renge, as she believed, they had to go through this. Renge also thought that Wendy and Itsuka had not known each other for very long, but still. When she looked at them, she could see how important the master was to the girl. Wendy was also important to Itsuka. Her face was never that of a slave before their common master, and he always treated her with the utmost respect and awe. Renge understood that she was trying to kill Itsuka, just like she did to Aina and Sorte, considering the boy a direct threat. Wendy behaved similarly regarding the master. Reng stood in a bow, saying once again that she was very sorry for what she had done. Wendy was speechless for a moment, remaining in shocked silence. Suddenly, Wendy said that everything was fine and she didn't hold any grudge. Renge wanted to object, but Wendy added that the gentleman himself had already forgiven the girl and accepted her here. It was for this reason that Wendy forgave Ranji. She loved her master and shared many things with him, including her attitude towards people, their actions, and potential. Renge looked embarrassed. Wendy quickly added that she still thought Renge was sometimes lacking common sense, so she should be more careful. Reng replied that she was very ashamed. Wendy said that she would clear the table after dinner. The girl also wanted to give Renger an order to take the food to the master. Reng agreed. She accepted the basket, realizing that it was not light at all. Wendy said that when Itsuka was studying, he hardly ate or slept properly. The girls began to smile at each other, realizing that they both wanted to take care of Itsuka. Later, Wendy stood alone in the kitchen, washing the dishes after dinner. The girls stood thoughtfully and washed the dishes. The words she had said earlier echoed in her head. The girl sincerely understood that she loved her master. Every time she said these words, it was as if something was pinching in her chest. Wendy felt sad at these thoughts, and her face fell slightly. The girl understood perfectly well that the master always touched her heart with his words and actions. But after that night, a lot changed. Itsuki almost never touched her body anymore. The girl undoubtedly wanted some proof of his love. Without it, she felt insecure and could not calmly put up with many things. When she is being cared for so much, it is shameful for the girl to behave like this. Shiro suddenly started to approach her, thinking that the girl was in pain. Wendy replied that it was indeed so and hugged the little girl. She added that it did hurt a little. Shiro began to stroke Wendy's head. At this time, Itsuki was working in his library. The guy was noticeably tired, telling himself that the recipe for a panacea was insanely complicated. He wanted to get a universal remedy, but nowhere was it said how to prepare it. The guy pointed to one of the books and said that lost body parts, illnesses, curses, any negative state, can be removed with a secret medicine. Itsuki thought that if he could make such an amazing thing once, he could create it instantly, using the, quote, famous magic circle he had recently obtained. A small magic circle formed on the guy's hand, and a small medicine began to form from there. The vessel began to grow in size, and the circle soon disappeared. Itsuki was surprised by this turn of events. He looked closely at the bottle, deciding to evaluate the item. Suddenly, he saw that it was the very same panacea, which was a secret medicine that removed all negative effects. It also cured lost body parts, diseases, curses, and so on. However, there was a note that this was only a means to prolong life and destiny. Suddenly, Itsuki heard Renge's voice behind him, apologizing as she entered. Itsuki immediately turned and smiled, asking the girl what was wrong. Renge held out the basket, saying that Wendy had asked her to give the boy his lunch. Itsuki's mind was spinning with thoughts about how he managed to do something like this. He didn't understand if it would be a problem if people found out that he could create something like this. Itsuki thought about the fact that he had never done anything like this before, including the panacea itself. The guy couldn't completely figure out why he did it so easily now. Suddenly, Itsuka thought that this could be the fruit of serving the goddess. The boy did not fully understand whether such things were even legal in this world. He did not understand whether he should do such things. When Itsuki finished, he left the workshop and headed down to the others. The boy thought that it would be better not to tell anyone about what happened to him while he was working. The first person he saw was Wendy. Itsuki smiled and called the girl, then handed her the lunch basket. The guy said that it was very tasty. Renge was also standing in the kitchen holding a knife to cut a fruit. Itsuka happily asked if Wendy had any plans right now, and then he added that he might need help. Wendy thought for a moment and said that the gentleman should rest more often. The girl squeezed the basket and said that she would now make the young man some tea. Afterwards, she turned around and started to walk away without answering the gentleman's question. Itsuki was upset because he wanted to offer a joint vacation, not work. After some time, Aine and Sorte also returned from the guild. The girl's appearance left much to be desired, and it was clear that they had been on a difficult mission. Itsuki also greeted the girls, asking why they were so out of breath. Sorte replied that it was nothing. Wendy handed the girl towels, saying that the bath was ready for them. Sorte lay down in the hot water, saying that she felt alive again. Aina turned to her friend and said that Sorte was right now more than ever. After the girls took a bath and changed their clothes, Itsuki was waiting for them in the guest room. They all sat down together and waited for tea. Meanwhile, the guy started asking about what happened. Aina began to tell, saying that it all started with receiving a request from the Adventurers Guild. Wendy approached the guys and said that the tea was already ready, then put it on the table. Aina continued, saying that the request was for the capture of a monster that had escaped from a dealer in strange creatures. It was a special kind of killer rabbit. But this individual also possessed human intelligence, which made the task much more difficult. It was for this reason that the monster was unusually agile, like an animal, and ruthless, like a real monster. Aina said that they tried to catch him, but the monster itself turned out to be more cunning, so it planned an ambush in advance and attacked the adventurers first. Itsuki chuckled, saying that the girls apparently had to retreat because they were being attacked by a menacing rabbit. Sorte indignantly added that they did not retreat but acted strategically smart. Afterwards, Sorte shouted that they would still see who would ultimately beat whom in this fight. The girl was going to catch this rabbit with her own hands and twist off its long ears. Afterwards, Sorte enthusiastically said that their team was finally fully assembled, and they were ready for another capture of a vile monster threatening people. Itsuke raised his hand and said that he wished the girls good luck in this matter. He hoped that they would be able to cope and catch the monster. Afterwards, the girl pointed her hand at Shiro and said that there was something concerning her personally. The girl said enthusiastically that Shiro would go with them. Itsuka was surprised by such a statement. Sorta replied that Shiro was quite strong, so she would be useful to them in this sortie. Shiro went with them and Sorte started to encourage her. The girl assured that they would definitely win today. Aina added that after that they would celebrate the victory and party all night. Itsuke and Wendy watched the guys go, and then the guy said with a smile on his face that the group of girls was quite noisy, in the good sense of the word. Wendy turned to the gentleman, saying that dinner would be shared between the two of them. Itsuke turned around timidly and replied that the girl was absolutely right. Wendy turned and walked towards the kitchen. Itsuka thought that it had really been a long time since they had been alone together. After some time, the dinner was ready. It was something meaty, like a steak. Itsuke cut off a small piece and immediately tried it, amazed at the magnificence of the food. When they had finished eating, Itsuke decided to retire. The guy went out onto the balcony and leaned on the ledge. His face seemed downcast. The guy understood that he had been thinking all sorts of thoughts for himself, and now he couldn't calm down. He lowered his head and quietly said that he was no longer a teenager or a schoolboy, but then he himself did not understand why everything was happening this way. The boy decided that next time he had the chance, he would do things the right way and be more decisive towards Wendy. Itsuke slapped himself hard across the cheeks, bringing his mind back to its senses, then gathered himself, turned around and, clenching his fists, walked back into the house. The boy went straight to the bathroom, deciding that he should wash himself thoroughly before what might happen. He decided that the bad smell of his skin might embarrass Wendy. Afterwards, he also brushed his teeth several times, rinsed his mouth, and thought that now he felt much better and more attractive. He got dressed and went out, deciding that he would succeed. Itsuke approached Wendy's door and began to raise his fist to knock gently. But suddenly he stopped. The guy wondered if Wendy herself would agree to all this. Itsuke began to remember his previous world. Several women stood in a circle and judged the men, saying that they were completely tactless. One of the girls then agreed, saying that they also needed training. Itsuke began to tremble as doubts began to overwhelm him. The boy kept telling himself that this was definitely not about him and that none of this was true. Itsuka also said that he would not compare Wendy to some monkey. Suddenly, Itsuke heard a girl's voice addressing him. It was Wendy, who was surprised to see the gentleman in front of her door. It was so unexpected for Itsuke that he even screamed in surprise. Wendy came closer and asked if the gentleman had any business with her. Itsuke was immediately confused and could not immediately give a clear answer. Wendy opened the door and invited him into the room herself. Inside, they sat down at a small table opposite each other. Itsuke continued to feel awkward and confused, constantly looking away. Wendy saw this and decided that the situation needed to be lightened a little. Again, she did not understand exactly what was happening to the gentleman. The girl said that she would go and pour him some tea. Itsuke suddenly pulled himself together and grabbed the girl's hand as she walked away. He stopped her, still holding Wendy. Itsuka called her by name, startling the girl a little. Itsuka quickly rose to his feet and then told Wendy that he wanted to fulfill his old promise that he had once made to her. Now, Itsuka wanted Wendy to allow him to fulfill it. Wendy raised the gentleman's hand and said that she supported him. Then the girl added that she had wanted this for a long time and wanted to become one with the gentleman. The girl timidly added that she herself always wanted to be near Itsuke. Afterwards, the guy began to approach her and then kissed her. Wendy said that she loved the master. In the end, Wendy and Itsuka were left alone at home and spent a great night together. The next day, a day's drive away, the adventurer girls and Shiro arrived at the place where the rabbit monster lived. They gave chase and began to gradually surround him, cornering him. Suddenly, Shiro appeared in front of the rabbit and raised her weapon, shouting that the monster would not escape this time. She swung and hit, but missed. The girl was sure that she would definitely catch the beast now, but the rabbit managed to dodge, jumping up. He passed the girl, but Sorte knew very well that they had very little time left to win. They intended to exhaust the monster. Suddenly a huge bear appeared in front of her, stood on its hind legs and growled. Sorte was surprised by this turn of events, not expecting such a threat. In the excitement of the chase, the girl shouted that this was starting to irritate her. She swung and hit the bear with a stick, knocking the beast to the ground. Then she shouted to the others to catch the rabbit. The rabbit changed its direction and ran to the side, but another adventurer was already waiting for it. It was Renge, who said that she was already there. Renge waved her hand, saying that this time the monster would definitely not be able to escape from them. She smiled widely and saw the rabbit make another jump. Renge swung, but the rabbit avoided her blow as well. The beast flew past from above, passing the girl. Renge thought until the very end that the chance to catch her belonged to her. But Renji couldn't catch the beast. It jumped over her and rushed on. Renji just turned around and thought that the monster was really fast. Then she rushed after it. Trying to catch it once again, Renge pointed the rabbit at Ain, who was also ready. The girl swung the net and managed to catch the rabbit. Sorte saw that Ain had managed to catch the beast and joyfully shouted that the rabbit had got what it deserved. Afterwards, they all gathered and began to discuss the hunt, which had been difficult for them. Sorte added that after a while, they were able to catch the beast. Ain thought that, despite everything, they had done a great job. Now Sorte wanted to see their catch. When they took the rabbit out of the net, they found that there was only a doll lying there. This shocked the girls greatly, and somewhere off to the side, a real rabbit was giggling. While he was distracted, a menacing Shiro appeared in front of him. The rabbit was very surprised, remaining in his place. Afterwards, he started running again, but no matter where he tried to jump, Shiro was always in front of him, not letting him escape the chase. Shiro looked at the monster and said that he would become her lunch. Meanwhile, at home, Itsuke had collected a basket of dirty clothes. The boy smiled and said that he would help Wendy with the laundry today, and then asked about any other chores. Wendy said that they had already done everything. The girl also added that she did not want to bother the gentleman, so he could not worry. Itsuke replied that it was not difficult for him to help. Suddenly, they heard someone at the front door asking to open the door for them. Itsuke asked in surprise who wanted to come in. The stranger said they needed help. It was Lord Olagal, who was accompanied by a bespectacled adult man. The girl had come to have a dialogue with Itsuka. Itsuke thought that they had finally managed to resolve the chaos and return to a calm everyday life, but after some time, he was visited by the girl Olegal. He had previously met her on the street in the city. Itsuke thought about how he had to leave the mansion and go back in time again, only to find himself back in the ill-fated dungeon where it all began. There was some noise inside. The guy held his sword, telling the monster that he was here. The monster rushed at Hayato, and he cut it in two. Afterwards, Hayato put his sword back in its sheath and walked over to the rest of his group. He asked the girl if they had been injured during the battle. One of the girls put out the fire in her hand and said with a smile that there was not a single scratch on them. The others gave similar answers. Hayato approached Chris and asked if she was tired. Chris shook her head, saying that she was fine. Hayato added that they should take a short break anyway. Eventually, they made a halt and lit a small fire, on which they put a camping pot. One of the girls began to prepare food. The mage girl handed Hayato a mug. Afterwards, she also added that she still does not understand why the young man agreed to this request. After all, in her eyes, Hayato abandoned his quiet life and returned back to the dungeon. Hayato smiled and replied that he couldn't do anything about it. The guy promised to find the healing elixir. Hayato also said that the girl should understand that this is the real treasure of this dungeon. The group's doctor worked with Chris. She didn't understand the scale of it, because if it was that bad, then they had come here on purpose. Hayato said that there really was no other way out. The mage said that they must be looking for a real antidote. Hayato explained that Olegal is, first and foremost, a person who thinks about her country, so a ruler like her is a threat to all spiteful people and enemies. Hayato added that he would not forgive himself for the fact if he could not bring the girl the elixir they were going for. Afterwards, the guy asked if he was doing the right thing. They didn't answer him, keeping silence. The mage girl changed the subject and asked about what happened to the man from Hayato's city. The guy thought that it was about Itsuka. Hayato took a sip, then explained that they hadn't been in touch for a long time since he was here in the dungeon and Itsuki was in the city. As far as Hayato knew, Itsuki was an alchemist. Afterwards, the girl turned her gaze to the small bag and asked if he had collected these ingredients for Itsuki. Hayato replied that he had, as he had carefully searched for them in the dungeon to give them as a souvenir of their expeditions. The sorceress said again that Hayato was going to make an offering in a magic bag. She thought that Itsuki would be very happy with such a gift. Hayato replied that Itsuki was indeed a very good person, and he himself was glad to know him. The mage thought about it, saying that Hayato was completely different from that guy from the city. Suddenly a little girl ran up to them and grabbed the magician by the leg. The girl screamed that she couldn't get enough and wanted more. The girl said that there was very little soup and she needed at least a little more. The magician sharply answered that the girl should not hang on her leg because it was heavy for her. The team's doctor interrupted their argument and told the girls not to make noise. After all, they could awaken some monster, which was already swarming throughout the dungeon. They needed to keep as quiet as possible. The magician calls Emily to be quiet. Hayato immediately began to calm the girls down, asking them not to be nervous. Then Hayato turned to Chris and asked how she was feeling. Chris replied that Emily had cast a spell that made her feel much better. Hayato said that in that case, they should hurry up and find the treasured elixir faster. The man apologized for coming to Itsuki's house so late. He explained that his mistress urgently wanted to meet the boy. Itsuki was surprised that it was Olegal in front of him. The man apologized and immediately corrected Itsuki, saying that Olegal was the lord of this city and country, so she should be treated accordingly. Itsuki was surprised, and then called the guests inside his house. Wendy prepared tea for them and they sat down in the living room. Itsuki bowed his head and remained silent. He began to feel awkward as he apologized to Olegal for the awkward situation that had happened between them earlier. When Itsuki remembered it, he laughed nervously. Olegal grinned widely in response, waving her hand. She told Itsuki not to worry about it, since he wasn't the first person to think that Olegal was her grandfather's name. The girl also added that everyone thinks that she is too young for the position she is in. She also added that the guy's dirty thoughts have already managed to fantasize a lot of things, and it seemed funny to her. Itsuki turned away, realizing that he was in deep trouble. Olegal said that she was also a half-breed and could read other people's minds. But she wasn't going to judge Itsuki, because for his age, this was normal. The man bowed his head and said that the lady had completely forgotten to introduce him. The girl immediately apologized and pointed at him, saying that this was her personal butler, Soma. Olegal also said that she was very pleased to finally meet Itsuki in such a setting. The girl called him brother, which made the boy nervous again. Soma looked around and guessed that this large mansion must have been given to Itsuke by his brother. The boy replied that this house was given to him by Darwin. Olegal was surprised, and then immediately asked how the guy was living here. Itsuke answered that the house was quite large and had an alchemy room and a luxurious bathroom. It was for this reason that Itsuki thought he was living quite well here. Olegal said that she was pleased to hear about the bathroom. The girl added that she would use it some other time. Itsuki smiled, saying that the cypress bath was truly a paradise for smooth skin. Afterwards, the boy exclaimed that there were several other baths in the mansion. Olegal started coughing, which surprised the guy. She covered her face. Soma immediately leaned towards his mistress with concern. The girl said that the others don't have to worry and that she's fine. Itsuki turned to Wendy and said that Olegal was not looking well. The boy asked Wendy to bring her a small bottle. Wendy meekly agreed and said that she would do it now. A few minutes later, Wendy reappeared in the living room, returning with a small tray. On it was a small bottle, which Wendy had summoned to Soma. Wendy explained that it was a medicine obtained by concentrating and synthesizing various restorative potions, so they didn't have to be afraid, and it would be better for Olegal to drink it. Olegal asked happily if this was really so. The girl took the medicine in her hand and said that she hoped it would not cost the young man too much. Itsuki replied that she didn't have to worry about it. Olegal opened the lid and started drinking the medicine, after which she seemed very upset about something. Itsuki immediately asked how Olegal was feeling. The Lord replied that she was already much better, and immediately thanked the young man for the help he had given her. Olegal immediately said that the potion Itsuki had prepared seemed quite strong. The youth and Wendy immediately smiled, accepting the compliment. Afterwards, Itsuki took a few sips of tea and asked about the purpose of the visit, the appearance of Olegal. The girl seemed to remember this topic and said that she wanted to offer to do business. Olegal also said that Itsuki could try to create different kinds of panaceas for the Red Cross community that provide help to all people. Itsuki immediately became tense because he was more looking for a quiet life. Olegal said that she was able to carefully study the reports of alchemists and other people. This showed her that people who work in the pharmaceutical industry have a gold mine inside them. That is why she knew who she was signing a contract with. She also knew perfectly well that the guy had already made some kind of agreement before her, but that doesn't stop Olegal. She is selfless when it comes to work that brings benefit. The girl also said that she takes into account that Itsuki himself is a good person who helps others. Therefore, he is a great candidate for a partnership with her, since she can read the guy like an open book. Afterwards, she folded her legs together and said in a commanding voice that, for this reason, she wanted Itsuki to agree and not think too long about this proposal. In response to this, Itsuki laughed nervously again. The boy thanked Olegal for such an offer and, as one might say, a certain trust. Olegal said that she can't say that she did anything worthwhile, but the guy doesn't have to worry about it and shouldn't thank her again. Then she stood up and changed her tone abruptly. The girl added that Itsuki was creating too many external problems that were reaching her. Itsuki replied that he didn't think it was his fault. Olegal said that she understood, but that the guy was connected to all the problems, and it was a bit of a hassle. Soma bowed and apologized to the boy. The man added that they did not want to worry Mr. Itsuki too much. The butler wanted to smooth over his mistress's ardor with this. Soma also added that they would do everything in their power to do this. He promised to sort it out. Olegal turned to the butler and told him not to meddle where he was not wanted. The girl did not have time to finish speaking and scold her butler, as she again bent down and began to cough violently. The butler anxiously pressed himself to his mistress. Itsuki asked again if the girl was okay. Olegal apologized and said that her health had been poor lately, so they had to say goodbye for today. Soma and Olegal got into their carriage and headed towards the palace. Wendy stood next to Itsuki and asked the boy if everything would be okay. The boy thought about it and said that he was still worried. Suddenly, the girls appeared at the house. Sorte shouted that they had finally arrived. It was a surprise for Itsuki and Wendy. Renge happily congratulated everyone on their return home. Itsuki asked how it all went. Sorte handed over the bag and said that the hunt had been very difficult. Renge added that they had had to work a little. Sorte started bragging again, saying that such an animal was no problem for them. Suddenly the bag opened, and the rabbit jumped out. The rabbit quickly walked towards Wendy and grabbed the girl's leg, starting to tremble with fear. Itsuki immediately crouched down, starting to shout at the hare. Wendy was very embarrassed at this time. The rabbit continued to tremble, and small tears formed in his eyes. Suddenly, someone picked him up. It was Shiro. She immediately began to put the rabbit in his place. Olegal returned home and went straight to her bed. The girl lay down and the butler escorted her. Olegal apologized to Soma for her behavior. The man said that everything was fine and Olegal could rest in peace. Afterwards, the man went out into the corridor and closed the door. A man called out to him. He asked about what had happened to the Lord. He thought it was the same as always. Soma stopped Volkas, saying that the girl needed peace. Volkas said that Hayato had failed with that task after all. He couldn't believe that they had no other choice. Soma said that this poison, or rather curse, cannot be cured just like that. Volkas said that they must find at least something that can help the lady even a little. Itsuki sat in his workshop and thought about the fact that that strong medicine couldn't help Olegal. The guy didn't understand what Olegal was so sick with. The boy opened the small box where he kept his experiment. He looked at Panacea and said to himself that they could try this.